If there's one thing we love over here at Channel Frederator, it's animation, baby. What a fascinating art form. Taking still images and bringing them to life in ways that can only be described as magical. The amount of work, dedication, skill, and love that goes into animation cannot be overstated, and it creates some of the most fascinating media out there. So let's celebrate animation the best way we know how, with a Frederator Marathon. Welcome back to Channel Frederator. I'm Keegan, and today we've got a marathon celebrating the work of various animation studios. Let's get into it. First up is Disney time. Where would animation be without the work of Disney? And where would computer-generated animation be without Pixar? To get you into the animation mindset, here's 107 facts about Disney Pixar, followed by 107 facts about Walt Disney. Enjoy.
Despite popular belief, Pixar was not affiliated with Disney when it was created. The studio began with the graphics group of the computer division of Lucasfilm, created by George Lucas in 1979 to develop cutting-edge film technologies. This included everything from sound editing to laser film printing, and it was the test site for modern-day computer graphics. The graphics group, at this point part of the legendary effects team at Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM, was recruited from a group of animators and engineers working at the New York Institute of Technology. It consisted of Edwin E. Catmull, Al V. Ray Smith, and Jim Morris, who all had important roles to play in the development of Pixar. In 1982, ILM completed the Genesis effect sequence for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. This sequence depicted a lifeless planet rapidly transforming into an oasis. This became the first completely computer-animated sequence in a feature film, which paved the way for the VFX industry to come. All of these artistic innovations eventually led to talks with Disney. For years, Catmull and Smith made annual trips to Disney animation studios, expressing interest in creating computer-animated films. Few people were on board, with the exception of John Lasseter, who cut his teeth on the Brave Little Toaster. Like many in the group, Lasseter was fixated on the idea of creating stories out of these strange computer polygons. This, at the time, required a whole lot of creative thinking. All this brainstorming led to the creation of Where the Wild Things Are, a test short in which hand-drawn characters moved around a three-dimensional set. While Disney was not too impressed with John Lasseter and Glenn Keane's collaboration, Catmull and Smith were intrigued. Lasseter joined ILM in 1984 as an interface designer, but worked well beyond that initial job's title. The same year at SIGGRAPH, an annual computer graphics conference, ILM premiered a partially completed version of their first short film, The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, as well as a prototype for the Pixar image computer. It wasn't the technology, but the craft that won the audience over. The art challenged the technology, and the technology inspired the art. This philosophy reflected the foundation of Pixar's approach to filmmaking. The innovations didn't just end there, though. The ILM team was also behind the stained glass night sequence that appeared in the film Young Sherlock Holmes in 1985. In 1986, Steve Jobs purchased the computer division from Lucasfilm for $5 million and launched it as an independent company named Pixar, based off of the computer with the same name. Pixar's first client was Disney for their collaborative work on CAPS, the computer animation production system, which painted hand-drawn animation digitally. CAPS was a success, and it managed to save Disney a lot of money. It's actually estimated that CAPS probably saved Disney about $6 million in development costs for The Lion King alone. That year also saw the completion and release of Luxo Jr. The film became the first three-dimensional computer-animated short film to be nominated for an Oscar, receiving a nomination for Best Animated Short Film. Luxo Jr. went on to become the mascot for Pixar. He's seen during the opening credits of all Pixar films since 1995's Toy Story. Pixar's second short film, Red's Dream, was also completed and released in 1986. A large portion of the film was rendered entirely on the Pixar image computer. The film debuted at SIGGRAPH and was met with praise. However, despite its warm reception, it still cost Steve Jobs a whole lot of money, and this would become a recurring problem for the Pixar team. Nevertheless, 1988 was still a big year for the studio, as their proprietary animation system was completed and put into use. The system was known as Marionette to the public, but in-house it was called Menvi. Menvi is short for Modeling Environment. Pixar's proprietary rendering program, RenderMan, came out shortly after. Both of these tools were utilized by Pixar in their third short film, Tin Toy. A partially completed version of Tin Toy was released to the public, and the finished film went on to its official debut at the Ottawa International Animation Festival later that year. Tin Toy would be the first CGI film to win an Oscar for Best Animated Short Film in the 1988 Academy Awards. While this brought a big spotlight to Pixar as a company, they still weren't making enough money to continue their independent filmmaking. In 1989, Pixar began making commercials as an alternate revenue stream. Their first commercial was an ad for Tropicana orange juice called Wake Up. The ad was directed by Lasseter and produced by Ralph Guggenheim. The pair would go on to have the same roles for the development phase of Toy Story in 1995. Eventually, Andrew Stanton and Pete Docter were brought on to work on additional commercials. By the end of 1990, Stanton and Docter had finished the shorts Quite a Package for Trident and Boxer for Listerine. If you recognize those names, you've got a good eye, or ear, or both. Stanton went on to direct and write Finding Nemo and WALL-E, receiving an Oscar for both films in the Best Animated Feature category. Stanton also directed 2 episodes of Stranger Things 2, which was released in October of 2017. In 1991, Disney and Pixar announced an agreement to make and distribute at least one computer-generated animated movie. Pixar would go on to create Toy Story for Disney, the world's first computer animated feature film. Initially, Toy Story was going to be a sequel to Tin Toy. In fact, it was going to be a 30-minute special called A Tin Toy Christmas. Disney later passed on the idea, but aspects of it, like a soft pink bear named Lotso, would eventually be adapted into other projects. It seems impossible to imagine Toy Story with any other title, but it was just one of many names that were tossed around. Would you have watched the movie if it was called The Cowboy and the Spaceman? Or Toys in the Hood? Yeah, we didn't think so. Tom Hanks is another staple of the series, but when Tom Hanks was too busy to voice Woody, he had his brother Jim step in to take care of it. Man, I wish I could call on my brother to replace me for stuff. Joss Whedon played a role in the writer's room for Toy Story and wrote one of Lasseter's favorite lines: "You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity." Whedon also created Rex, the neurotic Tyrannosaurus Rex. November 19th, 1993 was an important date in the development of Toy Story, but it was not an auspicious day. Production was halted after Disney execs saw a reel of the film. They found Woody and Buzz to be sarcastic and unlikable. Pixar returned to Disney 3 months later with a reworked script, and they were given the green light to continue the project. The film was released in 1995 and became the highest-grossing film of the year, earning $192 million domestically and $362 million worldwide, which, adjusted for inflation, is well over $500 million. Toy Story was nominated for an Academy Award in 1996 for Best Original Song, Best Original Score, and Best Original Screenplay. While the movie didn't bring home an Oscar in any of those categories, John Lasseter was honored with a Special Achievement Oscar from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences for the creation of the first feature-length computer animated film. In 1997, Disney and Pixar announced a new deal for the two companies that said they would produce 5 movies over the span of 10 years. Many of these film concepts originated at Hidden City Cafe in Point Richmond, California during the summer of 1994. The outlines and sketches that were written on napkins would go on to become A Bug's Life, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, and WALL-E. Hidden City Cafe was actually featured in the background of Monsters Inc. and on a license plate in Toy Story 2. Unfortunately, the cafe was closed in 2012, but lives on through many Pixar movies. Pixar also shouts out its employees' children by listing them in the credits. If you look closely, you'll see the names of any children born to members of the production team during the year preceding a film's release. Lee Unkrich, a director for numerous Pixar films, has said, quote, "If you ask any of us which movie we were making when one of our kids was born, we'll be able to tell you instantly. It's like our family lives are permanently woven into the movies. Thus, the production babies were born." A Bug's Life entered development a year before Toy Story was released. Steve Jobs described the film as a make-it-or-break-it feature since it was the follow-up to a blockbuster success. Production also had to make do with a smaller staff. While development cycles for Pixar films vary, the film with the shortest cycle for both production and development was A Bug's Life. The film was only in production for 3 years before it was released to the public, while films like Toy Story 3 took at least 4 years to develop and produce. While the development cycle was shorter for A Bug's Life, the film utilized almost 10 times the computing power that Toy Story did. The average frame took around 3 hours to render. Blooper reels in animated movies were unheard of, but let it be known that A Bug's Life was the first movie of its kind with bloopers at the end. The next Pixar film to include bloopers was Toy Story 2. While a majority of Pixar's team was working on A Bug's Life, there was talk of a Toy Story sequel. Catmull, Lasseter, and Guggenheim visited Joe Roth, then chairman of Walt Disney Studios. Roth was very receptive to the idea and gave them the go-ahead, but there was a caveat. The sequel would be a direct-to-video feature. Much of the Toy Story 2 staff were drawn from the Interactive Products Group, a production organization within the company devoted to computer games. The group put out the Toy Story Animated Storybook and the Toy Story Activity Center, two successful CD-ROM titles that were finished under extreme deadlines. Jobs initially believed that the Interactive Products Group could develop computer games that would sell over 10 million copies, like the direct-to-video films Disney was putting out. Pam Kerwin, the head of the Interactive Products Group, wasn't convinced. So Jobs dissolved the group and moved employees onto the Toy Story 2 production team, while Kerwin put together a short films team. When presenting story reels of Toy Story 2 to Roth and Peter Schneider at Disney, the pair became extremely interested in releasing the title into theaters. This interest, in combination with mounting production costs, led to Pixar renegotiating a deal with Disney and pushing the film for a traditional theatrical release. While doing a routine file cleanup, one of the animators on Toy Story 2 accidentally initiated the deletion of a root folder with assets for the film. By the time an associate technical director noticed, over 90% of the film was lost. This was over 2 years of work that wasn't properly backed up. Luckily, technical director Galen Sussman, who had been working from home to take care of her newborn child had backups of the assets on her home computer. The team was able to recover all of those lost assets with the exception of a few days of work, and they were back on track. Toy Story 2 made its way into theaters on November 24th, 1999. It's the first film in history to be entirely created, mastered, and exhibited digitally. In 2007, it was revealed that Disney would purchase Pixar for $7.4 billion. At that point, Steve Jobs became a board member at Disney as he was the company's largest single shareholder with a stake of about 7.7%. Lasseter returned to Disney and was made chief creative officer for the company's combined animation studios, while Edwin E. Catmull, Pixar's president, would become president of Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios. Prior to Disney purchasing Pixar, Disney was moving forward with Toy Story 3 without Pixar's involvement. The agreement the two companies had signed in 2004 gave Disney the rights to all characters that were created by Pixar and gave them the right to make sequels to any Pixar films. The story would have seen Buzz sent off to Taiwan for repairs with the other toys going out to find him. Production was ready to go, but Lasseter axed the development, dissolved Circle 7 Animation, the division tasked with production of the film, transferred most of the employees to Walt Disney Feature Animation, and started the storyline fresh. Pixar Animation Studios was built to weather an earthquake and other natural disasters and remain functional. The building was designed by Rutherford and Chakeen and has a seismic isolation system that consists of a combination of 125 high-damping rubber bearings and 82 slider bearings placed between the steel-framed ground floor and the foundation. Pixar animators are allowed to decorate their office space however they desire. In fact, the company pays for the basic infrastructure such as walls, basic desks, chairs, computer equipment, and so on. Anything else the animator wishes to do with the space will come out of their own pocket. One animator added a whole second floor to his office. Andrew Gordon, an animator, took this to a whole other level when he found a small door in his office that led to a hidden room behind an air vent. Andrew Stanton walked into Gordon's office at one point and found that it was empty, but the small door was open, and so he crawled through. After discovering Gordon in the hidden room, it was decided that it would become a speakeasy that was thereafter referred to as the Love Lounge. The speakeasy has been visited by many celebrities, and their signatures decorate the walls. Roy Disney, Tim Allen, and Steve Jobs visited the bar, but Jobs thought of it as a meditation room as he abstained from drinking. When Gordon was promoted and moved to a different office, his new space had another room conveniently hidden next to it. This time, the secret room was accessed by lifting the head of a William Shakespeare bust and pressing a button underneath. This provided access to the Lucky 7 Lounge. Maybe it's that creative environment that makes Pixar's films so good. While doing research for Finding Nemo, the animators found that the dull eyes of some of the fish were not conducive enough for character expression. Ever resourceful, they found another animal to model the sea critter's eyes on. Man's best friend, the dog. Pixar isn't infallible, though. For Finding Nemo, Megan Mullally was initially cast as Dory based on her voice from Will and Grace, which was very much high-pitched. When Mullally came to record her lines, the crew realized that it wasn't her normal voice and requested her to raise the pitch. When she refused, she was let go. Finding Nemo also had an unintended side effect on the environment. The clownfish in the movie were so well liked that demand for the species as pets increased exponentially. This led to excessive capture and sales of the popular fish, which in turn caused a 75% drop in population of clownfish around the Republic of Vanuatu. At one point in time, The Incredibles could have been released through Warner Brothers Animation. Brad Bird, the writer and director of the film, released his previous animated film, The Iron Giant, through the studio, but the WB Animation division dissolved before the idea could flourish. The Incredibles was a film that certain members of Pixar didn't think was feasible. Parts of the technical team thought this will take years and cost $500 million. The film was to feature humans, fire, and a massive number of sets, which were all considered too difficult for computer-generated animation at the time. However, Bird asked for animators that were considered black sheep and experimented with animation techniques that weren't exactly traditional to Pixar. The team was able to put their theories to the test and were able to deliver a movie that had 3 times the number of sets and all of the difficult-to-animate portions. The film actually spent less money per minute than Pixar's previous film, Finding Nemo. Pixar films were all rated G until 2004's The Incredibles. The film received a PG rating for action violence, which makes sense considering the whole superhero aspect of the movie. The Incredibles was the last Pixar movie officially released on VHS, though there have been sightings of a Cars VHS release which was supposedly exclusively available from the Disney Movie Club in 2007. A113, which refers to John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Pete Docter, and Andrew Stanton's former classroom at CalArts, is an Easter egg hidden in every Pixar film. Can you find all of them? While it would seem safe to assume that the Toy Story series is the bread and butter of Pixar, Cars has generated over $10 billion in merchandise sales alone. While working on concepts for Cars, animators drew over 40,000 sketches of automobiles for the film. Cars 3 was Brian Fee's first foray into directing for Pixar, but he's worked on multiple projects over the years. He's worked in the art department for the first 2 Cars films and also has credits on WALL-E, Ratatouille, and Monsters University. Cars 2 is the only Pixar film to be rated under 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, coming in at a measly 39%. 99%. The Toy Story trilogy, on the other hand, has Toy Story and Toy Story 2 listed at 100%, but Toy Story 3 only comes in at 99%. And alright, let's set the record straight here. Planes was a spin-off of the Cars series, however, it was not directly produced by Pixar, though Lasseter was a co-writer and executive producer for the first film. Development for Ratatouille started as early as 2000 when Jan Pinkava began drafting the original concepts of the film. Brad Bird took the role as co-director and writer for the project, going as far to intern at Thomas Keller's The French Laundry restaurant for the MasterChef experience. If you ever wondered why the food in Ratatouille looks so delicious, it's because all of it had to be made in real life. Over 270 pieces of food were created by Pixar filmmakers during production. Every food item had to be prepared and styled in a real kitchen, then photographed for reference, and then eaten. Artists usually have some kind of shorthand to save themselves time when working on a piece. During production of Ratatouille, the artists didn't give any of the human characters toes. Can you imagine what those feet look like? Pixar planned to sell Ratatouille wine as a tie-in to the film, but pulled it at the last minute. The California Wine Institute approached Disney and advised that the wine could violate advertising ethics, as it featured the titular character, Remy the Rat, on the label holding a glass of alcohol. In 2007, Ratatouille, a Brazilian computer graphics cartoon by Video Brinquedo, was released and reported as a rip-off of Ratatouille by IF Magazine. While some critics believe that this piece was derivative of Pixar's film, it seemed that Pixar didn't pursue any sort of legal action against them. The average Pixar film has anywhere from 50,000 to 75,000 storyboards from production. WALL-E broke the mold with over 125,000 storyboards. The first act remained largely unchanged, but the second and third acts went through multiple iterations, thus driving up the number. In 2009, Up became the first animated feature film to open the Cannes Film Festival. It was also nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture, making it the second animated movie to ever do so after Beauty and the Beast. If you ever wondered if the team at Pixar did the math to find out how many balloons would have actually been needed to lift Carl's house in Up, you'll be happy to know that they did. Pete Docter, the co-director for the film, revealed that the technicians at Pixar estimated that 23.5 million balloons would be required to lift an 1,800 square foot house like Carl's. However, in the movie, only 20,622 balloons were used during the liftoff scene, and only 10,297 balloons were used during the floating scenes. We don't think that 23.5 million balloons would have fit on screen, and even if they did, it probably would have been excessive, so I guess we'll suspend our disbelief on this one, but you are walking on thin ice, Pixar. While the finished runtimes for Pixar movies run anywhere from 81 minutes to 120 minutes, the time it takes to animate is exponentially longer. During the production of Up, each animator produced an average of 4 seconds of animation per week. After the Up wrap party, the team that moved on to work on Toy Story 3 all shaved their heads for a fresh start on the new project. Speaking of shaved heads, Merida's hair in Brave took 3 years of study for the team at Pixar to animate. The scene where she removes her hood to show off the full volume of her hair took 2 months of work before it was considered satisfactory. And get this, the team created springs on a computer that ranged in sizes from short to long, fat to thin, stretched to compressed, and bouncy to stiff. They were then put into layers to create the curls for Merida's hair. That's over 1,500 hand-placed, sculpted individual curls. While Merida's hair in Brave was extremely complicated, Sully's hair in Monsters, Inc. was extremely voluminous. His fur has 25,336 key hairs, which are used to guide the motion and shape of the other 2.3 million hairs. Pixar created and registered an official tartan, a pattern for kilts with symbolic meaning for Clan Dunbrugh in Brave. You can look it up in the Scottish Registry of Tartans. Fans probably can't imagine anyone but John Goodman voicing Sully in Monsters, Inc., but Bill Murray was actually the first choice for the role. Apparently he tested and was interested, but producers of the film had trouble getting back in touch with him and moved on. The team behind Monsters University put each other through friendly hazing or initiation tests designed by department heads to keep in theme with the movie. There are over 400 characters in Monsters University, and each shot averages around 25 characters, which makes it Pixar's most populated film to date. Billy Crystal makes a wonderful Mike Wazowski, but he has a major regret with regards to Pixar. He was originally offered the role of Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story and passed. Randy Newman won his first Oscar for Monsters, Inc.'s closing song, If I Didn't Have You. He had previously been nominated 15 times in the Best Score and Best Song categories, but had never taken home the win. Apparently, Randy Newman was the Leonardo DiCaprio of the music Oscars. 90% of the monsters in Monsters, Inc. have Mike's tongue design. Try to spot the 10% that don't. Rendering for Pixar films has only gotten more intense as the years have gone by, as Monsters University took 100 million CPU hours to completely render. If this was done by one computer, it would have taken 10,000 years. While marketing Monsters University, Pixar created an admissions website for MU that provided the visitor with various information about the school. Kinda bummed I wasn't able to make it for homecoming weekend. Inside Out had a team of about 45 animators working on the film. This was about half the amount of previous Pixar films. Pixar wanted to ensure that certain story beats of Inside Inside Out resonated with international viewers, so they remodeled and reanimated certain scenes. One instance was when Riley didn't want to eat broccoli as a child. After polling Japanese children, Pixar found that many Japanese children disliked eating green bell peppers. The team went in and adjusted 3 separate scenes for this change. The clown nightmare, Jangles, was a tribute to Joe Ranft, the late director of Cars and longtime Pixar employee. Joe Ranft passed away in 2005. Pixar released a feature film every year from 2006 until 2013. The cycle was broken in 2014 when delays in production of The Good Dinosaur pushed the film back to a 2015 release. Both Inside Out and The Good Dinosaur were released in 2015 within 5 months of each other. Newt was a Pixar film announced in 2008 for a 2012 release that focused on the last 2 blue-footed newts that were forced together to save their species. Long story short, it never made it to the big screen. The long-standing reason for the cancellation was that the premise was too similar to Blue Sky's Rio, which was released in 2011. Ed Catmull brought up another reason for Newt's cancellation in 2014 during an interview with Fast Company. He noted that the premise just wasn't working, and Doctor, who took over directorial duties for the project, had a better idea gestating. That idea blossomed into Inside Out. When Pixar approaches a new project, the team embarks on a research trip to gather as much data on the subject matter as possible. This can range from going to Paris for food research to depressing visits to a dump for Toy Story 3. We can guarantee that the employees at Pixar are never bored. In April of 2010, Pixar opened an expansion, Pixar Canada, in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. The studio would go on to produce 7 short films based on Toy Story and Cars characters. In October 2013, Pixar Canada was closed so that Pixar could refocus at its main office. In 2012, Pixar officially retired Menvy, its long-lived proprietary animation system, in favor of Presto, a new proprietary system named for their 2008 short film. The new system is still referred to as Menvy internally though, so it could get a little confusing. Brave was the studio's first feature film created with the new system. Fans of the scores of Pixar's films should keep an eye out for Pixar in Concert. The studio teamed up with the San Francisco Symphony in 2012 and launched the program. Fans attending the concerts are treated to symphonic renditions of scores from the various Pixar films that have been released. The concerts are still ongoing and their schedule is listed on Pixar's site. Pixar's proprietary software, RenderMan, saw its official release for non-commercial use in 2015. The program is available via Pixar Store and can be utilized for batch rendering or rendering with an artist seat. It will set you back around $500 though, with an annual maintenance fee of $200. John Ratzenberger has been a voice actor in every single Pixar film released. He's best known for his work on Cheers as Cliff Calvin, but has shown up in other animated shows and films such as Captain Planet and the Planeteers, The Simpsons, and the dub of Spirited Away. Pixar movies are rife with references to other films that the studio has developed, but there is one mainstay that appears in almost all of the films. The Pizza Planet delivery truck from the Toy Story series appears in every film with the exception of The Incredibles, which is weird because if there are any movies that shouldn't have it, they should be Brave or The Good Dinosaur, but there it is in both of them. Pixar's accolades continued to grow in 2009 when Lasseter, Bird, Doctor, Stanton, and Unkrich were awarded with a Career Golden Lion Award during the Venice Film Festival. The award was presented to them by George Lucas, tying the animation studio back to their roots. Pixar has held a few different exhibitions over the years, allowing the general public to view internal original art. The first of these exhibitions was Pixar 20 Years of Animation, which opened in December of 2005 and ran until February of 2006 at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. This exhibit had over 500 pieces of original art from Pixar Animation Studios. Pixar continued the tradition with the Pixar 25 Years of Animation exhibition, which debuted in California at the Oakland Museum of California from July 2010 to January 2011. The exhibition then went international and visited Hong Kong, Amsterdam, Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, and Zaragoza over the course of 2011 to 2015. Pixar's most recent release as of the making of this video is Coco. Coco premiered in Morelia, Mexico at the Morelia International Film Festival on October 20th of 2017 and was released the following week in Mexico just before Dia de los Muertos, the inspiration behind the film. Pixar has collected a total of 13 Academy Awards, 9 Golden Globes, and 11 Grammys as of 2017 for its feature films alone. Of 772 nominations, the studio has collected a total of 378 wins from multiple award shows. Here's to many more years of magic, innovation, and success. And The Incredibles 2 next year, finally! Who is hype?
I'm Jeremy, and these are 107 facts you should know about Walt Disney. Number 1. And we start at the beginning. December 5th, 1901, Walter Elias Disney was born as the 4th child in a family with 5 children. He shares this birthday with Werner Heisenberg, yes, namesake of Walter White's alter ego in Breaking Bad. Number 2. The name of Disney is an Americanization of the French name Désigny from the town of Isigny-sur-Mer in Normandy. Number 3. One important event early on in Walt's life was when he accidentally killed a small owl. He felt so guilty about this that he vowed never to harm another animal, and this led to his interest in personalizing them. Number 4, taking this to a logical next question, was he a vegetarian because of this belief? The answer is a firm no. One of his favorite dishes was beef chili. Number 5, in fact, he loved it so much that he would bring cans of the stuff with him wherever he went, and he would ask the chefs of the hotels he stayed in to heat it up for him. Number 6, in a school play, he once played Peter Pan, a story he would later go on to adapt into a movie, though reportedly he was not happy with the way that one turned out. Number 7, his first real job was a simple paper route, which he had to do so early that he would frequently fall asleep in school. Number 8, Disney took an interest in art and drawing very early on. His first time working as a cartoonist was when he was still in high school, at the school newspaper, mainly about World War I, which the US had just joined. Number 9, Walt did enlist in the US military, was initially rejected for being too young, tried again with the Red Cross, and this time lied about his age. Now he was admitted and he did ship out to France, but only arrived when the armistice had already gone into effect. Number 10, but he did drive an ambulance while there, and true to form, decorated the side of it himself. Number 11, one of the other people in this unit whom Walt Disney served with was Ray Kroc, who is frequently credited as the brains behind McDonald's global expansion. Number 12, back in the US, he took a job as an artist for advertisements and commercials at Pesman Rubin Art Studio, where he met Ub Iwerks, with whom Walt would work for years to come. Number 13, Pesman Rubin would lay off Disney and Iwerks only a year later, whereupon Walt would come to work for Kansas City Film Ad Company, and this is what would directly lead to the start of his career in animation. Number 14. Technical note here is that he was mainly working with cutout animation, whereas Walt preferred to work with cell animation. Unable to convince his boss of this, Walt left the company to found his own with a co-worker called Laugh-O-Gram Studios. Number 15. That being said, the cited reason for him being fired was a, quote, lack of imagination. Now that's what you'd call irony. Number 16. Now this failed Laugh-O-Gram went bankrupt in 1923, but Walt finished a 12.5-minute semi-live-action Alice in Wonderland film just a little too late though. The studio went under and that version of Alice in Wonderland was never released to theaters. Number 17. Importantly though, Walt did keep possession of the finished film, and went to California to try his luck instead as a director of live-action film. Number 18. In Los Angeles, he met with Margaret J. Winkler, then the rights holder to Felix the Cat, among others, but she was losing those rights and needed something else. Disney, using the Alice in Wonderland film as a sort of resume, managed to sell her on the idea and got commissioned for 6 more of those Alice films. Number 19. It's important to note that had this not happened, Walt would have joined his brother Roy in selling vacuum cleaners door to door. Number 20. And now at last, Walt and his brother Roy formed the Disney Brothers Studio to produce those 6 films. Moral of the story? Walt Disney's path to success was anything but a straight line, instead being one of continuous trial and error, but he persisted and ultimately succeeded. Number 21. Now a couple of notable additions to the early studio. In 1924, Walt convinced Ub Iwerks to move from Kansas City to work for him in Los Angeles. And in 1925, he hired an ink artist named Lillian Bounds, whom Walt would marry a few months later. Number 22. 2 years later, Disney worked with producer Charles Lintz, and after the Alice films, Walt wanted to move to all animation and created his first original character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Number 23. 1926 is the point where the studio was renamed to the Walt Disney Studio, a name it would carry for the next 3 years, then being renamed to Walt Disney Productions. Number 24. Now the working relationship between Mintz and Disney was strained to say the least. Though a technicality, Mintz was the owner of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. The two had a falling out over money, whereupon Mintz convinced basically all of the animation staff from the Disney Brothers studio to come work for him in Universal, with only Iwerks remaining with Disney. Number 25. So now the Disney Brothers studio needed a new mascot, which turned out to be quite the team effort. Walt sketched a cartoon mouse he called Mortimer, a design which Iwerks would later refine, and Lillian didn't like the name Mortimer, instead suggesting to call him Mickey. Number 26. Mortimer would show up in an animated short in 1936, though, as Mickey's romantic rival for Minnie's affection. Apparently, Mortimer's design was based on Walt himself, though. Number 27. Here's where things get a little muddy. The first finished film with Mickey Mouse is Plain Crazy, but it wasn't the first one to be published. That was Steamboat Willie. Number 28. Steamboat Willie is significant in another way, as not only was it the first widely released appearance of Mickey, it was also the first cartoon ever to be made with a fancy new technology, post-produced sound. This is what truly made the 7.5-minute short a big hit with the audience. Number 29. This will also become a running theme in Walt's life and, by extension, this video. He was always looking for technological innovations to make his films better, and this is a big part of what made him so successful. Number 30. Plain Crazy would later be revised, now with the addition of sound, and released in 1929 to be another hit for Disney. Number 31. Walt Disney himself famously did the voice of Mickey Mouse until 1947, leading to many at the company saying that while iWorks gave Mickey his shape, Disney gave him his soul. Number 32. But this did create friction. Walt refused to give iWorks the credit he deserved for Mickey's final design, and iWorks left the studio in 1930 to found his own animation studio. Number 33. Perhaps unsurprisingly, iWorks Animation wasn't able to compete though, and he returned to Disney in 1940, where he started working on special visual effects and technologies, which would lead to breakthroughs that would pave the way for more movies like Mary Poppins. Number 34. Now Disney begins the Silly Symphony series, which soon became a decent hit. It wouldn't really take off until 1932 when they released the installment Flowers and Trees, which became one of the very first animated films in full color and became a huge hit. Number 35. This was not a surprise though, as Walt had managed to secure the Technicolor patent, making him the only person allowed to make animated films in color. This patent was only valid for 2 years. Number 36. Because most of the animation had already been done in black and white, Walt nearly went bankrupt converting the whole thing to color, but it definitely paid off because it was a huge hit and would also win him his first Academy Award. Number 37. This was the first of 22 Oscars Walt Disney would win during his life, more than any other individual. He won a further 4 more honorary Oscars and was nominated a total of 59 times. Number 38. In fact, Walt would receive at least 1 Academy Award nomination every year for the rest of his life, with the only 2 exceptions being 1933 and 1941. Number 39. That said, one of the cartoons he produced in 1933, Three Little Pigs, was so popular with the general audience that it was frequently billed over the actual feature film it was supposed to accompany. Number 40. For his 35th birthday, his employees threw him a surprise party at the behest of his brother. 2 of the animators thought it would be funny to make a short clip of Mickey and Minnie consummating the relationship. Walt fired them both on the spot. Number 41. By 1934, Walt was growing tired of producing nothing but animated shorts. They were successful, but having spent years trying to make people laugh with his cartoons, he started wondering if it would be possible to make people cry with them instead, and he decided he needed to make a feature-length animated movie. Number 42. To say the media were skeptical of this would be an understatement. They were so convinced that it would be a disaster, they nicknamed the project Disney's Folly, and they may have had a point. Number 43. The production of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs cost $1.5 million, which doesn't sound so bad until I tell you that it exceeded its originally estimated budget 3 times over. Number 44. But it definitely struck a chord with audiences, because not only was the film a huge hit with audiences earning $8 million, it also won him an honorary Academy Award, 1 full-size statue accompanied by 7 smaller ones. Number 45, but then a tragedy struck the family. After the success of Snow White, Walt bought a new house for his parents, but there was a leak in the heating and his mother died from carbon monoxide poisoning, something Walt felt guilty over and is frequently hailed as the reason why so many Disney characters don't have mothers. Number 46. This convinced the studio to begin 2 more projects in 1938, Pinocchio at the start of the year and Fantasia by November. The problem was, animation takes a long time, and both of them were released in 1940, by which time World War II had broken out in Europe, meaning very little revenue from over there. The Disney company was now in trouble. Number 47. So in that same year, Walt and Roy decided to take the studio onto the stock market in an attempt to expand their funds, and this, in combination with a salary cut of everyone at the company and producing Dumbo on the cheap, largely worked, and it kept the studio afloat. Number 48, around this time though, Disney took a stab at adapting Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale The Snow Queen, but he couldn't quite get it to work. It would be 70 years before this finally came to fruition, as Frozen. But given how loose the adaptation is, no surprise he couldn't get it to work. Number 49. It's late 1941 and the US joins World War II. Walt doesn't enlist again, he's a bit too old for that, and instead starts producing training videos for the military and various factories supporting the war effort. Number 50. On the more cartoony side, he also made propaganda films for the US Department of the Treasury, both to promote the sale of war bonds and in an effort to lift public morale, which was very low at this point in time. Number 51. 1942 sees the release of Bambi, another financial loss for Disney, again because of the war, but he couldn't get around it. It had been in production since 1937. Number 52. The propaganda was more successful though, the most famous of which probably being Der Führer's Face featuring Donald Duck, whom we haven't mentioned until now, despite having been created in 1934. Number 53. This film also went by the titles of Donald in Nutsyland or Nightmares in Nutsyland. You can see why they didn't go with those, even in the context of the war. Number 54. That said, an Army draft notice was delivered to the studio following the Pearl Harbor attack, addressed to Donald Duck. Number 55. However, one of Disney's propaganda films, Victory Through Air Power, was shown to, among others, Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, and actually went on to influence policy and strategy of the Allies, mostly concerning long-range bombing. Number 56. One of the scenes in that film, a rocket bomb destroying a German submarine pen, led to British engineers developing that cartoon into a real weapon that would become known, informally, as the Disney bomb. Number 57. While that bomb worked well in theory and even in testing, a continuous problem the pilots had using it was accuracy, so the actual success of the bomb is debated. Number 58. It's 1945, the war is over, and Walt Disney can now focus back on keeping his company afloat, because throughout the war it was perilously close to bankruptcy. Number 59. The company was $4 million in debt with the Bank of America, which is huge, and the only reason the bank didn't pull the plug on it was a gut feeling by the executives that even though the risk was high, it would pay off in the long run, which it did. Number 60. One thing to note on the war, there are very persistent rumors to this day that Walt Disney was secretly a Nazi sympathizer, but as far as anyone who actually worked with him was concerned, this isn't true. Even Art Babbitt, developer of Goofy, who hated Walt and went so far as to sue him at one point, never mentioned anything of the sort. Number 61. So why the rumors? Well, they started in 1938 when Leni Riefenstahl, the famous director and Nazi propagandist, got a tour of the studio from Walt Disney himself, only a month after the Kristallnacht, a massive attack on Jewish-owned buildings and synagogues in Germany, so there was no way to make that look good. Number 62. And that brings us to 1946, when because of their consistent money problems, Roy Disney convinced his brother that they should be including more live-action pieces into their animated movies to save money. Number 63. Walt listens to this, and in that year they release Song of the South. Great timing. Way to make all those racism arguments go away. For the record, it's set on a plantation in the Deep South, and even at the time, was heavily criticized for its stereotypical portrayal of black people and other archaic depictions among others. Number 64. If you haven't heard of that movie, it's because Disney doesn't want you to have heard of it. It's never been released on home media in the US, and neither is it on Disney+. Number 65. Now, while there is no real evidence to support the notion that Walt Disney was considered a racist by the standards of the time, there is plenty of evidence that he was fervently anti-communist. He had been passing information on that subject to the FBI from 1940 to his death. Number 66. For this, he was given direct contact with J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, and given the title of Full Special Agent in Charge Contact in 1954. Number 67. Walt Disney was quite the train enthusiast, having originally wanted to become a train engineer. Obviously, this didn't happen, but when he moved to Holmby Hills in 1949, he did get a miniature railway in his own backyard, and gave it the rather grandiose title of Carrollwood Pacific Railway. Number 68. For this, he got a rideable working steam locomotive that he named the Lily Bell after his wife. Number 69. Sadly, he didn't get to enjoy it for very long. In 1953, there was an incident while one of his guests was operating the train, causing it to derail, and a girl suffered burns on her leg from the escaping steam. Number 70. A lot of investors in the studio were not sold on Disney's idea of a theme park, so he set up another company with his own money to get different investors to build his park. Number 71. But he purchased a plot of land outside Anaheim and began the construction of what would become Disneyland. Originally, he wanted it next to the studio, even going as far as getting zoning permission, but there wasn't nearly enough space available in Burbank. Number 72, he chose Anaheim because demographics experts convinced him there would be a population boom there over the next 10 years or so. They turned out to be completely right. Number 73. Of course, the studio itself didn't stand still either, releasing Cinderella in 1950, the first fully animated Disney movie since Pinocchio, and finally, another success for the company. Number 74. But this is also where Walt Disney starts to distance himself somewhat from the animation department. He's still a key figure in deciding the hows and whats of the stories, but is more hands-off, leaving more decisions to his animators. Number 75. On July 17, 1955, Walt Disney's pet project opened its doors and it was a complete disaster. Because of counterfeit tickets, it was too busy. Rides weren't finished and kept breaking down. Traffic was backed up, water fountains didn't work, and the weather was so hot that the freshly poured asphalt slightly melted, and women in high heels would sink into it. Number 76. It was, however, attended by Disney's friend Ronald Reagan. Reagan was a television host at the time for the show General Electric Theater. Number 77. A lot of people also thought that the water fountains being turned off was because the opening ceremony was sponsored by Pepsi, and that it was a cynical attempt to sell more drinks. The truth was that the plumbing wasn't finished because the workers were on strike, and Walt had to choose between having either the toilets working or the water fountains, and chose the former. Good call. Number 78. Walt's love for trains persisted though. The train around the park's 4 themed areas was designed to look like the miniature train he had in his own backyard, albeit a lot bigger. Number 79. But ultimately, those issues were all ironed out, and the park soon became a big hit, having attracted 3.6 million guests by the end of its first year. Number 80. Around this time as well, home media begins to rise, and Disney, ever the innovator, latches on immediately. He struck a deal with ABC, believing it could be a powerful marketing tool, which he was quickly proven correct on. Number 81. Walt was also called in to produce a film for the World Fair in 1958, and produced a short film called America the Beautiful, which would be moved a year later to the American National Exhibition in Moscow. It was one of the most popular attractions there. Number 82. When Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev visited the US in 1959, he had 2 requests: to meet John Wayne and to visit Disneyland. He wasn't allowed into the park, but he did get to meet John Wayne. Number 83. Walt Disney was also chosen to be the head of the pageantry committee and designed the opening, medal, and closing ceremonies of the 1960 Winter Olympics. Number 84. Despite not being involved with the day-to-day at the animation studio anymore, the technical firsts did keep up though, having the first animated movie in CinemaScope, Lady and the Tramp, the first animated movie on 70mm film, Cinderella, and the first movie to use Xerox cells, 101 Dalmatians. Number 85. And of course, in 1964, one of his biggest hits came out with Mary Poppins. He had been trying to buy the rights from the author of the books, P.L. Travers, since 1938, after his daughters had made him promise to turn the book into a movie. Number 86. The struggle for the rights and the creative direction of the movie was adapted into a movie of its own in 2013, Saving Mr. Banks, with Tom Hanks as Walt Disney. Number 87. Fun thing to note, Tom Hanks is actually a distant cousin to Walt Disney. Number 88. Incidentally, most aspects of this movie are not accurate. When Travers arrived in Hollywood to give her approval of the script, Walt Disney himself left a few days into her visit to go on vacation to Palm Springs. A lot of the dialogue in the movie was adapted from telegrams, letters, and phone calls between them. Number 89. And while Travers famously didn't like the movie, critics and audiences loved it, and it was Disney's only movie to be nominated for Best Picture during his life. Number 90. For the 1964 World Fair in New York, he he developed the It's a Small World, sorry for putting that incredibly catchy tune in your head, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, Carousel of Progress, and Ford's Magic Skyway, all of which would later be reinstalled in Disneyland. Number 91. With the success of his theme park, he was looking to venture out to other places, and he started planning a ski resort in Mineral King and Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Number 92. Ever the futurist, he wanted the centerpiece of the park to be Epcot, his idea for what the community of tomorrow would look like. Sadly, he would never see this project finished. Number 93. Walt Disney was diagnosed with lung cancer in November of 1966 and died from it a month later, only 10 days after his 65th birthday on December 15th. Number 94. The lung cancer was not a huge surprise, though, since Walt had been a heavy smoker since he was a teenager. However, because he sold products aimed primarily at children, he avoided smoking in public where they could see him. Number 95. It also gave him quite a heavy smoker's cough, something that was very useful for his employees as it often heralded his arrival. They would also warn each other with the phrase, "Man is in the forest," a reference to Bambi. Number 96, there are two very persistent rumors, one being that he was cryogenically frozen, and one that he was buried under Disneyland. Neither are true. Walt was cremated and his ashes interred at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Los Angeles. Number 97. Epcot was never built, though, and even though Walt's brother Roy came out of retirement to finish the park, Walt's vision was never fully realized, instead being turned into the Epcot Center in 1982. Number 98. Neither was the ski resort, which would remain a paper project forever, as the company saw way more potential in the Orlando park. Number 99. The last few years of his life, Walt did become more involved with the production of movies, though, and the last movies he worked on were The Jungle Book and Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. Number 100. Technically, he also worked on The Happiest Millionaire, but that movie was such a disaster both critically and financially that we don't really count it. Number 101. After Walt's death, you can kind of tell just how much of a driving force he was behind the animated movies, as both their frequency and quality would take quite a hit after 1966 for years to come. Number 102. There is some debate about Disney's last words. It was either Kurt Russell, who was a child actor at the time, but even Russell didn't know why Walt Disney would say his name on his deathbed, or a comment on how shabby the water tower at Disney Studios looked. Number 103, whatever the case, studio executives made sure that the water tower is now regularly repainted. Number 104, people often think that the Disney logo was Walt's signature, but this is not true. His signature was much simpler, and the logo was designed by an animator at the studio. Apparently, Walt himself was never able to replicate it. Number 105, he quite disliked being referred to as Mr. Disney by his employees, and insisted that they just call him by his first name. Number 106, after his death, he left 25% of his estate to Cal Arts, which the private university used to build up the campus. Number 107, and in spite of his very recognizable appearance, Walt banned Disney employees from wearing a mustache in 1957, a ban that was not lifted until the early 2000s.
Next up, the classic cartoon debate, Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. Every time I think I have my answer locked in, I remember a specific episode from whatever opposite network I'm thinking of and have to start all over again. So try to lock in yourself and see where you land after 107 facts about Nickelodeon and 107 facts about Cartoon Network. Yes, 107 for both.
I'm Adrian, and let's get underway with 107 facts about Nickelodeon. Number 1. Nickelodeon was started by Dr. Vivian Horner on December 1st, 1977, as part of a test to see how popular a children's broadcast would be. As it turned out, it was popular, but not necessarily successful right out of the gate. Number 2. Part of this may have been that the initial test only ran in Columbus, Ohio. Why this specific city? Well, largely because of the Cube system, which was a closed-circuit TV network hooked up to about 30,000 homes. Number 3. Nickelodeon was able to piggyback on the start of the system by carving out a 2-hour time slot every day, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., in which they exclusively broadcast the show Pinwheel. It was aimed at really young children, preschoolers. The creative director of the show was Vivian Horner. Yep, Nickelodeon's very first show was helmed by a woman. Number 4. Cube was part of Warner Cable. Yes, that Warner, the one that would later become Warner Brothers, which is only the most public part of the obscenely powerful and far-reaching Warner Media Group. Number 5. Commercially, this was not a big success, but not for the reason you might think. Back then, TV for children wasn't allowed to have commercials in it, but it was a great hook to sell the network idea to parents. After all, anything to shut the kids up for 2 hours, right? Number 6. And so, on April 1st, 1979, the project went nationwide in the US, with this newly commercially available technology called satellites to distribute it. Number 7. Of course, for it to go nationwide, they needed more than one show. So they had, among others, America Goes Bananas, a stand-up comedy show, and Nickel Flicks, which was cancelled a mere 2 years later for ostensibly being too violent. Number 8. Incidentally, because of its short run, and because the magnetic tapes film was recorded on were in very high demand at the time, Nickel Flicks was all recorded over, and it's now considered a lost show where no copies of it remain. Number 9. One thing we still haven't talked about is the name, which some of you may be wondering about. Back in the very early days of film around 1900, Nickelodeons were small movie theaters, started in regular businesses where the staff would project silent films. Number 10. Still doesn't explain the name though. That is a contraction of a nickel, the price of admission, and an odeon, an ancient Greek word for a roofed-over theater. Good thing the price wasn't a dime. Number 11. So now you know the origins of this line.
I saw that in a Nickelodeon once and I always wanted to do it.
Number 12. And if you're wondering why you've never been to one of those, it's because they started being outcompeted by purpose-built cinemas around World War I, now that it became clear that movies were here to stay and it was worth the investment. Number 13. Back to the actual network. The year is 1981, and Nickelodeon is in trouble. Over the years, their time slot grew, now up to 13 hours every day, and they were still operating at a yearly loss of $10 million, not adjusted for inflation. Number 14. Warner Communications decided around that time that Nickelodeon wasn't worth it anymore, and sold off the company to MTV. Yes, that MTV. This was a bit of an in-house move though, as Warner also owned MTV. Number 15. Viewership was lacking too. Most shows failed to gain any kind of traction, and Nickelodeon was dead last when it came to viewership nationwide. Number 16. We're now in 1984. Nickelodeon has been running for 7 years, 5 of which fully public, and yet it has a grand total of 5 employees. Number 17. By now, their loss had increased to $40 million, which is nearly $100 million today when adjusted for inflation. In an attempt to reinvigorate the network, MTV made a golden move by handing creative control over to Fred Seibert and Alan Goodman, who by all conventional measures saved Nickelodeon by a widely effective rebranding. Number 19. Do put a pin in the name of Fred Seibert, because he'll become important later on. Number 20. On the business side of things, Geraldine Laybourne was put in charge, who wasn't uncontroversial for reasons we'll get to in a minute. But it worked, and she saved the network from almost certain bankruptcy. Number 21. But how did they pay for this? Well, it was Laybourne who made the decision that Nickelodeon would start airing commercials as well. Without going into politics too much, those regulations concerning advertising for children were relaxed under the Reagan administration, and this couldn't have come at a better time for Nickelodeon. Number 22. 1984 also saw the first use of the now famous Splash logo, which the network would use until 2009. Number 23. This rebranding worked, and by 1985, Nickelodeon was now the highest rated children's channel in the United States. Number 24. It was also in 1985 that the network went from airing only part-time to airing full-time, starting in June, and it was also here that Nickelodeon really started leaning in on their credentials as the first network for children. Number 25. But apparently that wasn't good enough for Warner Communications, and so they sold off the entire stock to Viacom, which still owns Nickelodeon to this day. Number 26. Of course, you can't make a successful TV network without good shows, and some of the main ones they were leaning on were existing shows like Mr. Wizard's World, You Can't Do That on Television, and Livewire. Pinwheel was also still airing, although by now it was only reruns. Number 27. Filling the evening hours would of course be difficult for a children's network, so they were geared more towards adults, largely with reruns of The Donna Reed Show, a sitcom from the 1950s that would look instantly familiar to anyone who's seen WandaVision. Number 28. But it wasn't until 1988 and 1989 that the channel would become way closer to the Nickelodeon we would recognize today. They started the Kids' Choice Awards. Pinwheel was phased out in favor of Nick Jr. as the programming for preschoolers, and most relevantly to us, 1989 saw the green light for Nicktoons. Number 29. It's worth noting that before this point, Nickelodeon had never actually produced any kind of animated show, and all they aired was acquired cartoons. Number 30. That's not entirely accurate, because in 1980 they produced Video Dream Theater, which was a failure in early test screenings and never actually made it to air. Number 31. But these acquired and often imported cartoons were successful, especially the Looney Tunes, and made enough money for Nickelodeon to fund the first 3 in-house animated shows: Doug, Rugrats, and The Ren and Stimpy Show. Number 32. These shows were very unusual for the time though. Most cartoons back then relied on some kind of existing IP, like Transformers or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but Nickelodeon actively steered away from that kind of branding. Number 33. Of these 3, Rugrats was the most successful one, with 172 episodes produced over 9 seasons and only ending production in 2004. Number 34. Both Doug and Ren and Stimpy had 52 episodes made while running at Nickelodeon. Though on Doug, it's worth mentioning that Disney bought the rights to the show in 1996 and made 3 more seasons totaling 65 episodes and even a movie. Number 35. Because of these successes, Laybourne's tenure as vice president and later president of Nickelodeon would become known as the network's golden age, lasting from 1984 to 1996. Number 36. Part of her tenure was the opening of Nickelodeon Studios in Orlando, Florida in 1990, as not only a place to film shows, but also as an attraction for visitors and tourists. Number 37. This was an obvious attempt to mimic Disney's wildly successful theme parks, which at the time were very much carrying that company. However, Nickelodeon's version was much less successful, given that a lot of their shows were actually filmed in California and the attraction shut down in 2005. Number 38. Nickelodeon started selling their first cartoons on home media, VHS only at the time, in May 1993 to great success. This was in collaboration with Sony Wonder, blowing the starting whistle for a beautiful partnership that would certainly last forever and ever. Number 39. Until 1 year later, when parent company Viacom bought Paramount Pictures and forced Nickelodeon to re-release everything with their home entertainment branch instead. Number 40. And it's here that Nickelodeon really gained the confidence to spread its wings and venture out into other countries. In 1993, they started with the United Kingdom, Australia, and Germany. And this is a good illustration of how fast things were moving back then. By 1995, they were broadcasting in 70 countries. Number 41. Also around that time, we see the end of You Can't Do That on Television and the start of All That, which would go on to launch many careers, including those of Amanda Bynes, Gabriel Iglesias, and later on Jack DeSena. Number 42. Also around that time, 1996 to be exact, Laybourne left Nickelodeon and became president of Disney ABC cable networks, though this wasn't a huge success as she only worked there for 2 years. Number 43. Nickelodeon's new president became Herb Scannell, and he wanted to stake his bets differently. Number 44. Over the coming years, more and more shows would be released to varying degrees of success, like Rocko's Modern Life, Hey Arnold, The Wild Thornberrys, and Cat Dog. Number 45. Most of these shows did okay though, and ran for at least 4 or 5 seasons. Number 46. In July of that same year, Nickelodeon released its first movie to theaters, an adaptation of the book Harriet the Spy, starring Michelle Trachtenberg. One more career launched right there. Well done, Nick. Number 47. While the critical reception was middling, financially the movie did about as well as could be expected, earning back its $13 million budget twice over. Number 48. It would take another 2 years to release their first animated feature, the Rugrats movie. This was much more successful, becoming the first non-Disney animated movie to gross over $100 million in the US. Number 49. In 1998, with all that going, Nickelodeon quietly launched a series of shorts called Oh Yeah Cartoons, which had a modest 3-year run and mostly consisted of animated shorts, some of which would later go on to become full shows, but this one was never a huge hit. Number 50. 3 of the shorts that became their own show were Fairly Odd Parents, My Life as a Teenage Robot, and Chalk Zone. Number 51. So, let's bring back the name I told you a while ago, Fred Seibert. Why did I mention it? Well, because these cartoons were produced by Fred Seibert, told you he would show up again, and his animation studio, Frederator Studios. Yep, this is where we got our start, in a partnership with Nickelodeon. Number 52. While most of their animated shows were successful, none of them were really capable of carrying the studio on their own, something that didn't really change until May 1st, 1999 with Number 53.
Are you ready, kids?
Yes. This year saw the start of SpongeBob SquarePants, by far Nickelodeon's biggest hit, as it's still running to this day in its 13th season. Number 54. Believe it or not, but creator Steven Hillenburg had to fight Nickelodeon on a lot of creative decisions and almost walked out on the project altogether in 1997. One of the chief problems was SpongeBob's age. Hillenburg wanted him to be an adult while Nickelodeon wanted him to be a child in school. Number 55. In total, the entire SpongeBob franchise and its merchandise went on to earn Nickelodeon $13 billion so far. Number 56. But of course, it wasn't Nickelodeon's only show. The live-action shows continued as well, with some of the more notable ones being The Amanda Show, its spin-off Drake and Josh, and later Ned's Declassified School Survival Guide. Number 57. In fact, The Amanda Show itself was a spin-off from all that. Number 58. As mentioned before, The Fairly Odd Parents was made into a show of its own after its pilot in Oh Yeah Cartoons, but it definitely took its time to get there. However, of the three, it was by far the most successful one, running for 10 seasons and clocking in at 172 episodes. Number 59. Now in 2002, Nickelodeon tried out something new. 3D animation with Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, their first dabbling in the animated realm outside of hand-drawn. Number 60. And here we enter one of the more interesting time periods for Nickelodeon, where they put out a number of shows that were critically well received and yet somehow lacked the viewership necessary to sustain them. These included Invader Zim, My Life as a Teenage Robot, and Danny Phantom. Number 61. The one that fans were probably the most angry over was Danny Phantom, which still has a fairly large cult following and even recurring petitions for Nickelodeon to make more episodes. Number 62. That said, My Life as a Teenage Robot was one of the oddest patterns because it took Nickelodeon nearly 6 years to air just 40 episodes, which was probably the cause of the low ratings that led to its cancellation. Number 63. This is also where Nickelodeon first looked into its past for inspiration and decided it was worth a go to revamp Rugrats, only with the cast aged up a decade and with dealing with the issues that come with that, called All Grown Up. Number 64. While the show had a middling reception, mostly because it was a follow-up to Rugrats, it still did pretty well during its initial run. It had 5 seasons, while the average for Nickelodeon is usually only 3 or 4. Number 65. On the business side of things, Viacom wasn't sitting still. One of the shadier things they did was separate the ratings of Nickelodeon and Nick at Night, which they were accused of doing solely to boost the ratings of the main channel. Number 66. There's probably a core of truth to this, given that when Nielsen changed the rules that a channel should take up at least 51% of its airtime to qualify for ratings, so Nick at Night was dropped from those ratings. Number 67. Also around this point, for reasons that weren't very well understood, even at the time, Viacom split up. One half would keep the name Viacom, the part that ran Nickelodeon, and the other half would become CBS. The official reason given was that this was necessary to respond to a changing industry landscape, whatever that means. Number 68. But now we've reached the year 2005, and this was the year that Nickelodeon Studios in Florida finally closed down. Interest in game shows and sitcoms was in decline, and with Nickelodeon having more of a foothold in California, it just didn't make sense to keep the studio open. Number 69. The building itself still exists though, and for a long time was occupied by the Blue Man Group as their permanent staging ground. However, their residency ended in February of 2021, and the building is currently vacant. Number 70. This didn't end Nickelodeon's dive into theme parks though. They don't have truly independent parks like Disney does, but cooperate with SeaWorld Australia, Movie Park Germany, and a couple of others. Number 71. Worth mentioning is that Nickelodeon Universe in the Mall of America in Minnesota held the record for the largest indoor theme park in the West from 2008 until 2019. Number 72. They lost this record to themselves, because a slightly larger Nickelodeon Universe opened in American Dream in the Meadowlands in New Jersey. Number 73. We also haven't talked about Nick Jr. much, so let's change that. The thing is, Nick Jr. went through a lot of rebranding, but with a lot fewer changes than Nickelodeon itself after each one. It formally started after Nickelodeon ended Pinwheel in 1988 and gradually rose to prominence throughout the first half of 1989. Number 74. Unlike Nickelodeon though, all of Nick Jr.'s ideas were bought in from other studios, at least at first. One of the earlier success stories was with The Muppets, where they bought in shows from the Jim Henson Company. However, there was stiff competition from PBS and TLC, so Nick Jr. decided to go to in-house production as well. Number 75. The earliest success they had with this was Blue's Clues in 1996. This worked and gradually put Nick Jr. back ahead of the competition, and in 2000 launched what would become the backbone of the studio for nearly 20 years, Dora the Explorer. Number 76. In 2009, something of a weird move was made. Nick Jr. became its own separate channel under the same name, but the airtime slotted in the Nickelodeon main channel was now rebranded as Nick's Playdate. This would only last about 5 years though, as in 2014, the Nick Jr. brand returned. Number 77. And that didn't matter anyway, as the separate Nick Jr. channel kept on existing as well. And if all of this sounds like a giant corporate mess to you, it is. In fact, this isn't even half of it. So back to the main channel and back to the year 2005. Number 78. For those of you who are good with years or just fans of the show, you've probably guessed the one we're at. The big one. Yes, it's Cat Scratch. I'm kidding, I'm of course talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's hard to overstate how influential this show was, spawning comics, garbage movies, sequels, and more. Number 79. In fact, we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit, but both Nickelodeon and Netflix are looking to make new content in the Avatar universe. Number 80. For the three of you disappointed that I mocked it, Cat Scratch ran for 1 season, 20 episodes, and the general consensus seems to be, quote-unquote, passable. Number 81. In fact, of the 3 shows that premiered on Nickelodeon in 2005, the remaining one being the X's, only Avatar made it past its first season. Number 82. The funny thing is, after the unqualified success of Avatar, critics and audiences loved it alike, and it pulled in great ratings. Nicktoons really seemed to struggle finding a new foothold. Yes, SpongeBob and Fairly OddParents were holding up the studio, but now there's basically a 5-year period of shows premiering that would only run for 1 season, maybe 2, and then get cancelled again. Number 83. These are the aforementioned Cat Scratch and the X's, El Tigre, Tak and the Power of Juju, Back at the Barnyard, The Mighty Bee, Fanboy and Chum Chum, and Planet Sheen. Number 85. In 2006, Nickelodeon would see its 3rd president after Herb Scannell stepped down. This time, it was Seema Zarghami taking the reins. Number 85. The next big thing for Nickelodeon was a cooperation with DreamWorks, which led to Penguins of Madagascar and Kung Fu Panda Legends of Awesomeness both running for 3 seasons. Number 86. There was also a show based on Monsters vs. Aliens, but that only ran for 1 season and wasn't quite as big a hit. Number 87. The current state of affairs there is that DreamWorks was bought by NBC Universal and they stopped licensing their characters to Nickelodeon. Number 88. Rewind a few years to 2006. The live-action shows would get something of a boost though. The biggest boost for this was the start of iCarly in 2007, followed by Big Time Rush in 2009 and Victorious in 2010. These shows have remained pretty consistently popular, with iCarly even getting a revival from Paramount+, though that hasn't started airing yet. Number 89. But in 2009, something interesting happened on the business side, because Nickelodeon finally did something they had basically been avoiding ever since they started making cartoons themselves. They bought the rights to 2 existing properties, namely Winx Club and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Number 90. Winx Club was the first to hit the air, continuing with the story already established under the previous studio, Rainbow. It ran from 2011 to 2016 on Nickelodeon, but when Rainbow suffered a massive financial loss in 2014 with their movies Gladiators of Rome, there were very persistent rumors that the show would be cancelled. Luckily, this turned out not to be the case, but it did lead to some cost-cutting measures. Number 91. In 2011, something strange happened. For the first half of the year, Nickelodeon was the market leader in terms of viewership, which it had been for 17 years. But then midway through the year, the ratings took a nosedive. And why? Nobody knows. Even Viacom described it as inexplicable. Number 92. It would take until November 2012 for viewership to start rebounding, though it was much lower than the previous fall. Number 93. 2012 was a good year for Nickelodeon itself, however, with 2 big hits in the form of The Legend of Korra, the spin-off of Avatar, and the aforementioned Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Both of these helped with those viewership numbers. Number 94. Now these shows were big hits, but there is another pattern of shows only getting 1 or 2 seasons and frequently middling reviews and reactions. Number 95. That is until 2016, when Nickelodeon launches The Loud House, another massive hit, clocking in at 6 seasons and counting at the time of writing. Number 96. This show would eventually get a spin-off of its own called The Casagrandes, which we just did a video on. Go check it out, 107 Facts About the Casagrandes. Voiced by me, Adrian. Number 97. But also around this time, something of an exodus starts at Nickelodeon. First off, Chris Savino, creator of The Loud House, was fired in October 2017 after allegations of misconduct arose. In February 2018, Butch Hartman left the studio, and a month later, Nickelodeon parted ways with the creator of iCarly and Zoe 101, Dan Schneider. For similar reasons as Savino, and another 3 months later, Seema Zarghami stepped down to pursue a different career at a studio of her own. Number 98. And we also have to mention that in that same year, Steven Hillenburg passed away from ALS. Even though he hadn't really been involved with SpongeBob since the movie in 2004, it's tragic that he died at age 57 from a brutal disease, and the world is poorer for it. Number 99. Now, a new president was needed, and this would become Brian Robbins, who had been working at one of Viacom's other properties, Paramount Players. He had only been president for 16 months there. Number 100. And apparently the industry landscape had changed, because now Viacom decided that they did want to be together with CBS again because they remerged in 2019. Business is weird. Number 101. Nickelodeon hadn't been sitting on its hands though, because they purchased Paws Inc. mainly for the rights to the Garfield franchise, which they're now working on a new show of, which should come out next year. Number 102. The current running animated shows do follow an industry-wide trend of angling for nostalgia dollars, with 4 of the 7 being either spin-offs or revamps. Number 103. Though it should be noted on the Rugrats revamp, they have changed it with the times. The original portrayed the character of Betty DeVille as a strong feminist with a weak husband. The revival has made her lesbian. Number 104. To tell you the truth though, this style of animation seemed like a good reminder of what we mentioned in our last Airbender comparison. 2D drawings converted to 3D renders frequently look strange. Number 105. So what does the future hold for Nickelodeon? Well, there are the aforementioned Avatar shows and the Garfield show. Then there's the agreement Nickelodeon signed with Hasbro to start airing a Transformers cartoon for the first time. So there's that. Number 106. There is also an upcoming project around Star Trek, which should have just started on Paramount+, but will go on Nickelodeon later. And last but not least, number 107. Remember how Nickelodeon had 5 employees and was $40 million in the red? They've turned it around because Nickelodeon now has close to 12,000 employees and a yearly revenue of $9.3 billion. That is a lot. 107 facts you should know about Cartoon Network. Number 1. The idea of Cartoon Network was born quite a few years before it would actually go live. By 1986, channels like Nickelodeon and the Disney Channel were gaining quite a lot of traction with children's programming. So the Turner Broadcasting System, TBS for short, decided they wanted to give it a go. Number 2. To this end, they needed cartoons. At the time, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was almost broke, so TBS bought it and their entire library of cartoons, which included pre-1948 Looney Tunes, Merry Melodies, and the Popeye cartoons from Fleischer Famous Studios. Number 3. This relationship wouldn't last, however, as TBS couldn't really sustain MGM themselves, and sold it back to MGM CEO a mere 75 days later. However, TBS kept control over the film library. Number 4. So in October 1988, it was time for Turner Network Television to go live, including the aforementioned cartoons in the lineup. Number 5. But of course, 50-year-old cartoons alone can't sustain a complete network. So in 1991, Turner won out a bidding contest with Universal and Hallmark over the library of Hanna-Barbera animations for the neat price of $320 million. Number 6. Now, CEO Ted Turner thought he had enough of a library to shake it up with the other networks broadcasting children's TV and give them a run for their money. So he instructed the vice president of TNT, Betty Cohen, to lay the groundwork for what would become Cartoon Network. Number 7. On October 1st, 1992, they went live for the first time in New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Dallas, and Detroit to begin with. Number 8. They did this with great fanfare as well, set to the music of Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, followed by a special event hosted by Droopy of all characters. Number 9. And we haven't been completely honest with you, because until 1995, it wasn't just called Cartoon Network, it was called The Cartoon Network. The was an official part of the name until cooler heads prevailed and they dropped it. Number 10. Of course, Cartoon Network wasn't the first one to use cartoons to pull in their audience, but it was the first 24-hour channel to mostly focus on animation. Number 11. The reason they were willing to chance this was because TBS had launched CNN in 1980, the first 24-hour news network, which was also considered to be a risky play when it launched, but it was massively profitable, so they took the risk on cartoons too. Number 12. Still, one of the biggest problems the network had early on was selling people on the idea of 24-hour cartoons. However, because it all fell under the Turner Media umbrella, they were quite successful in offering package deals. Number 13. For quite a while, they still aired black and white cartoons late at night. These were the genuine 1930s cartoons, Max Fleischer and the likes, and they only stopped airing them in 2002. Number 14. In fact, they didn't stop airing the acquired cartoon shorts their network was built on until 2017. Number 15. They also had a block called High Toon Noons, hosted by cowboy hand puppets for an indication as to how simplistic they were willing to let their programs be. Number 16. But after Nickelodeon proved how successful in-house cartoons could be, Cartoon Network wasn't far behind, and in 1993, they produced their first one, The Moxie Show. Number 17. This show actually went through a lot of names, as it's occasionally also known as The Moxie Pirate Show or The Moxie and Flea Show. Number 18. That said, Cartoon Network never released this show on home media, either DVD or even VHS, and no full episodes exist on the internet. So even though clips of it remain, recorded by people at home, it's considered a lost show. Number 19. In that, it's a strange mirror to Nickelodeon, which also had one of its earliest shows being lost to history, as we mentioned in our 107 Facts about Nickelodeon. Number 20. Again, similar to Nickelodeon, they ran a short show of pilots called What a Cartoon, some of which would later become their own shows. Number 21. And yes, this one also involved Fred Seibert of Frederator Studios for basically the entire run of the show. Even though this was only one season, it did go on for almost 3 years. Number 22. But this opened the floodgates, and while the Moxie show was the first one of their in-house productions to air, it wasn't the first one to be produced. That honor falls to Space Ghost Coast to Coast, but that hinges on a bit of technicality. Number 23. Of course, this needed a name, so after no doubt weeks of deliberation, many meetings, and I don't even want to guess how many liters of coffee, they came up with Cartoon Cartoons. Great job, guys. Stellar creativity. Number 24. That said, the show themselves were a lot better, because the first one of these to hit the air was Dexter's Laboratory, or Dexter's Laboratory, in 1996, which really was a who's who of big names in animation. The creator was Genndy Tartakovsky, but it also included Seth MacFarlane, Butch Hartman, Rob Renzetti, Chris Savino, and more. Number 25. Dexter's Laboratory was very successful, and even though it was set to end in 1999, it proved popular enough to keep it going for another 4 years. You could learn a lot about Dexter's Laboratory in the 2 107s we did about it. Number 26. This didn't include original creator Genndy Tartakovsky though, as he moved on to produce other shows like Samurai Jack and Star Wars The Clone Wars, but more on that later. Number 27. Of course, Dexter's Laboratory has one of the most infamous children's cartoon episodes ever produced in rude removal. Even though any rude language was bleeped out, it was still banned from airing. That is, until 2013 when Adult Swim uploaded it to YouTube, which has since disappeared, but you can still find it if you go looking. Number 28. 1996 also saw an interesting leap on the business side of things because TBS merged with Time Warner. So even though Warner sold Nickelodeon in 1986 because they didn't really think it was worth it, now they were right back into children's television. Number 29. This also got them access to the rest of the Looney Tunes, which would air on Cartoon Network for the rest of their time on TV. Number 30. July 1997 was quite a busy month for Cartoon Network, as it saw the launch of Johnny Bravo and 1 week later, both I Am Weasel and Cow and Chicken. Number 31. Of these three, Cow and Chicken was the most successful one, at least initially, but the tide did start turning on it pretty quickly. Number 32. This show was somewhat controversial because of the arch nemesis of the titular characters, specifically the Red Guy. His superficial resemblance to Satan and attempts to lure the main characters to hell made some people upset with the show. Number 33. More offensive than this was the episode The Buffalo Gals, which involves a biker group consisting of butch, short-haired women who break into people's houses and chew on their carpet, and various other innuendos. It was only broadcast once and pulled from subsequent airings. Number 34. The spin-off of Cow and Chicken, I Am Weasel, was a little bit more successful, with 79 as opposed to 52 episodes, and it ran for 1 additional year. Number 35. That said, of the 3 shows released that month, Johnny Bravo would have the longest lifespan as it didn't end until 2004. Number 36. Yet, this was not a given by any means. With the initial success of the other 2, Johnny Bravo was put on something of a back burner and just kinda sat there for 2 years after a mere 13 episodes. But then it was revitalized in 1999 and became more focused on slapstick comedy in the remaining 3 seasons. Number 37. 1997 also saw the start of Toonami, where Cartoon Network would primarily air dubbed anime like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z. Number 38. Even though parent company Time Warner acquired the rights to what would become the most popular dubbed anime at the time, Pokémon, they kept that one to themselves on the Kids WB block, at least initially. Number 39. Why this was? Probably a money thing. They were released in tandem with Pokémon Red and Blue on the original Game Boy, and with the games proving so popular, it was a logical thing to cut out one extra corporate layer that would need to earn money from the show. Number 40. Next to hit the air was the Powerpuff Girls, another unqualified success for Cartoon Network as the show would run for 6 seasons until 2005. Number 41. This was also the last show made by Hanna-Barbera Studios because it was folded into Warner Bros. In 2001 after the death of William Hanna. The remainder was animated by Cartoon Network's in-house studio. Number 42. The CW did announce a live-action adaptation of the Powerpuff Girls in 2020, but after the script for the pilot got leaked and the reaction was terrible, they announced that they would rewrite the whole thing. Number 43. Moving on to what would become the biggest hit for Cartoon Network, Ed, Edd and Eddy. This was the first show produced by the network that didn't start life in the What a Cartoon show. Even though some parts of Ed, Edd and Eddy totally disturbed me, freaking I love that show. Number 44. Airing from 1999 to 2009, it was the longest running of the cartoons, by quite a margin, seeing how the 3 runner-ups each ran for 7 years. Number 45. 1999 was quite a year for Cartoon Network, as it also saw the first airing of Mike, Lou, and Og, but the less said about that the better, and Courage the Cowardly Dog, the show that was way more terrifying than a kid's cartoon had any right to be. Number 46. A popular theory is that Courage and his owners, Muriel and Eustace, don't really live as remotely as is frequently shown, but because they're an elderly couple, they don't have the mobility to travel very far anymore, and thus the farmhouse is all that Courage knows. Number 47. Because the final episode was somewhat of a downer, in 2014, a CG animated pilot was released called The Fog of Courage as a potential revival of the series. However, the project never came to fruition. Number 48. Then in 2018, series creator John Dilworth said he was in negotiations with Cartoon Network about another possible revival, but that also fizzled out, with Dilworth commenting in 2020 that it was transformed into another thing. Number 49. The year 2000 saw the release of Sheep in the Big City, and what a way to sound off the new millennium. Even though it was a hit on initial release, it only ran for 2 seasons, which is pretty low for Cartoon Network so far. Of all the shows, this was one of the shortest lived ones, as the network only aired reruns for 1 year after its conclusion. Number 51. Also in 2000, the programming block Boomerang finally spun off into its own separate channel, now that the networks were capable of handling the extra capacity. Number 52. Strangely enough, this wasn't the end of the block on Cartoon Network itself. That would trundle along for another 4 years, even though they now had a dedicated channel. Number 53. The year 2001 would bring along quite a shift for Cartoon Network, as the first president, Betty Cohen, would resign due to creative differences with Turner Broadcasting head Jamie Kellner. She was replaced by Jim Samples. Number 54. Of course, that reason is so vague it's basically meaningless, but she would state later on, quote, "I was afraid I would die the queen of cartoons. Unlikely, but let's face it, there are worse titles to die under." Number 55. But overall, 2001 was a pretty good year for Cartoon Network, as it would see the launch of Time Squad, Grim and Evil, and the big one, Samurai Jack. Number 56. Incidentally, Samurai Jack was the last show to be greenlit by Betty Cohen. Number 57. The funny thing about Grim and Evil is even though it only had 26 episodes, technically divided into 75 segments, but those were only 7 minutes each, it still got 2 spin-offs, Evil Con Carne and Billy and Mandy, at least the former of which was more successful than its progenitor. Number 58. That said, Samurai Jack never really fell under the Cartoons umbrella, and by 2004, the writing was on the wall for this block. Number 59. The funny thing is, unlike the thing it's most comparable to, Nicktoons, there wasn't really any kind of replacement for it. The name just faded into obscurity, and Cartoon Network aired the shows that had been airing for years on the main channel. Number 60. On July 19, 2002, Cartoon Network held a Summerfest, during which they would get to vote on what would be the next show from the series of shorts. The winner of this ended up being Megas XLR, inspired by the mech anime genre. Number 61. Before all that happened though, Samurai Jack became one of the best regarded shows on the network so far, having won 8 primetime Emmys as well as 6 Annies, which is rather incredible for a show that only ran for 4 seasons. Number 62. But with this, it's almost like Cartoon Network was freed from restraints that it previously put on itself, as they launched 2 new massively successful features: Adult Swim, the block that would go on to air cartoons aimed at an older audience, and the first iteration of Teen Titans. Number 63. This really was a massive shift, as these were not just fully completed licensed properties that they used to fill the time slots. Teen Titans was the first time Cartoon Network produced an in-house show based on licensed characters. Number 64. Of course, it should be noted that Daddy Warner Brothers was footing the bill here, as they had struck an agreement with DC Comics for both movie and TV rights to their characters, which would go on to bring us movies like Batman Begins, V for Vendetta, and The Dark Knight. Number 65. But it worked. Teen Titans was a big hit with audiences as well as critics, consistently pulling in good ratings as well as another run of prestigious awards, even if it didn't quite match up with Samurai Jack. But hey, by then it had to compete with Avatar. Number 66. Meanwhile, Toonami was still doing really well. More and more dubbed anime were coming in, but again, Daddy Warner Brothers was starting to see the potential in Cartoon Network more and more, as they let them have Batman the Animated Series as well. Despite being over a decade old at this point, it was still very popular. Number 67. Same went for Superman the Animated Series, though neither of them aired on the channel for very long, both only about a year. Number 68. Cartoon Network continued acquiring popular shows, with one of the most notable ones being Totally Spies, which had already been running for 2 seasons successfully on ABC Family. Number 69. This actually ended up becoming one of Cartoon Network's longest running shows, airing on the network from 2003 to 2014. Number 70. That being said, with the change in networks, Totally Spies would lose some of its main voice actors, notably Katie Lee, voice of Alex, and Jess Harnell, voice of Jerry. Number 71. 2003 would see another big hit for Cartoon Network, again based on an existing property, The Clone Wars. Keep in mind, this was before the mouse bought up every IP they could get their hands on, which is getting increasingly hard to remember. Number 72. Also, The Clone Wars aired while the prequels were still running. Revenge of the Sith hadn't quite come out yet and wouldn't for another 2 years after the show started. Number 73. It was also in 2003 that Megas XLR aired, and it didn't really work. Didn't quite pull in the necessary ratings to justify the cost, so it was dropped after a year and a half. Number 74. The next year saw the release of Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, helmed by creative director Craig McCracken, previously best known for creating the Powerpuff Girls. Number 75. To this end, Powerpuff Girls villain Mojo Jojo does show up in episode 1 of the show. Number 76. Some do say that this show kept the network alive after the ratings kind of slumped, following the cancellation of Dexter's Laboratory. How true this is? Hard to say. But I will say, it was definitely one of the more popular shows. Number 77. Cartoon Network went through a whole bunch of shows in this time, none of which would really catch on with the general audience. The most notable of these is Sunday Pants, which would only get 2 seasons. Number 78. That's not telling the full truth though. The show got slated for 2 seasons, but it was such a disappointment in the ratings that after 5 of the 11 episodes of the first season aired, Cartoon Network pulled the plug, and it's completely unknown what happened to the second season. Number 79. With that said, The Life and Times of Juniper Lee and later on Camp Lazlo didn't do horrible, both getting a decent run, and yet not really having the staying power that their previous shows did. Number 80. Luckily, in late 2005 or early 2006, when talking about wide release, the network would hit upon another big hit, Ben 10, which would go on to spawn no less than 3 spin-offs, a reboot series, and more. Number 81. Again, a bunch of shows launched in 2006 and 2007 that would only run for 1 or 2 seasons and never really land. The only noteworthy one is Transformers Animated, as it represents yet another step of Cartoon Network towards embracing licensed IPs. Number 82. In 2007, Jim Samples would leave Cartoon Network and would be replaced by Stuart Snyder, who had his own ideas of where the channel should go. Number 83. They tried their hand at a couple of live-action shows, given how successful those had been on Nickelodeon over the years, and boy did they learn the hard way that those were a lot easier said than done. Number 84. Unlike Nickelodeon, precisely none of them would prove to be successful for Cartoon Network. These included Destroy Build Destroy, Brain Rush, and Dude What Would Happen, to name a few. Number 85. Of course, Cartoon Network didn't heed good advice and tried to make Dude What Would Happen stick, it being very similar to the Discovery hit show Mythbusters, and ordered 4 seasons. This in spite of universal paddling sessions from both critics and audiences alike. Number 86. In fact, Snyder would lead the network through a whole list of so-called eras, most of them only lasting for a year or 2, if that. None of these really managed to stick though, and constant rebranding didn't do the network any good until the change of the decade. Number 87. Avid viewers of Cartoon Network may have caught on to the one we're approaching now. With old hits like Powerpuff Girls and Ed, Edd and Eddy slowly being phased out, Cartoon Network needed a new show to carry the studio, and after all the aforementioned meandering, found it in Adventure Time. Number 88. Worth noting that in an alternate timeline, it could have easily ended up as a Nickelodeon show. It was pitched by Frederator Studios, I promise there's no bias here, to Nick twice, and yet they passed it over both times. Number 89. Adventure Time has the most episodes of a single show to come out of a Cartoon Network at the time of its conclusion, coming in at 283. Ben 10 does technically have more, clocking in at 350, but that's spread across all of its spin-offs. Number 90. On top of that, because the network decided to split the final season into 2, it's the first show of Cartoon Network to break 10 seasons. Number 91. But don't worry about Nickelodeon though, because they clearly made the right call, rejecting the pitch for this massively successful show in favor of Fanboy and Chum Chum. I can't think of a joke here. Nothing I could say would make this either more poignant or more hilarious. Funny enough, it was also a Frederator show. Number 92. And now we once again enter into a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks period, with such timeless classics as Tower Prep, Robotomy, and The Problem Solvers, with a Z. Just so you know it's cool. Number 93. That's not entirely fair though, as this period did see the release of The Amazing World of Gumball, which is technically on hiatus at the time of writing, but hasn't been officially cancelled, so who knows what'll happen. Number 94. But one of the big ones would come in 2013 with Steven Universe. This would be another show that defined a generation of cartoons, particularly in what was considered acceptable for a children's cartoon to be discussing in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity. Number 95. That having been said, this kind of discussion didn't come out without a price, as it faced some form of censorship in basically every country or region under the sun. 96. But at the same time, it was enormously influential on how other Western shows dealt with those themes, such as The Legend of Korra and She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. Just goes to show you can't push boundaries without pissing a few people off, but sometimes that's exactly what's needed. Number 96. With all of that, Steven Universe definitely struck a chord with audiences, as it ran for 5 seasons with 160 episodes total over 6 years. Number 98. And as a cherry on the cake, Steven Universe got a movie in 2019 and a limited epilogue series of an additional 20 episodes running until March 2020. Number 99. Meanwhile, Cartoon Network decided to take another stab at the Powerpuff Girls, but this time with much more limited success. Despite there being 3 seasons produced, the latest episode aired in June 2019, and this show is presumed cancelled, even if not officially. Number 100. And the network would have one of its most epic fails in Long Live the Royals, having one of the shortest runs of any show ever, 4 episodes across 4 days. Excellent. Number 101. Meanwhile, another change of presidents for the network was on hand, with Christina Miller taking over the reins from Stuart Snyder in 2014. Number 102. This is where things get a little tricky though, as we have constantly been talking about how Ben 10 has 1 root show and 3 spin-offs. Well, no doubt some of you are already telling me I'm wrong in the comments. There's also a 4th spin-off, this one being a reboot. And yes, this does exist, and it only ended earlier this year. Number 103. Moving on to OKKO Let's Be Heroes, because that's more interesting to talk about, mostly because the episode Crossover Nexus, which has Garnet, Raven, and Ben Tennyson appearing. Yes, I'm a sucker for crossovers. Number 104. Speaking of Raven, we haven't mentioned Teen Titans Go yet. In spite of criticism over the show appearing overly simplistic and some would even say juvenile compared to its predecessor, it has been very successful, as it's still running to this day. Number 105. Here we get another rapid changing of the guard, with Miller leaving in favor of Michael Auerlein, who would only stay on as interim president for about 6 months before he was succeeded permanently by Tom Aschheim. Number 106. 2019 would also see the release of moderate success Infinity Train, which the creator Owen Dennis has expressed a desire in continuing, but Cartoon Network decided otherwise after 4 seasons. Number 107. And that brings us pretty much to today, with the major upcoming releases being spin-offs of We Bare Bears, one from Adventure Time, and another series of Ben 10. How rosy that looks? We'll leave up to you to decide.
If you're looking for some raunchier humor or perhaps some more mature situations, then look no further than Adult Swim. They've been putting together some of the funniest and craziest stuff for decades, and they don't seem to be really slowing down. Here's 107 Adult Swim facts you should know.
Number 1. Before Adult Swim, there was Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and before that, there was Mike Lazo. Lazo began his work in the TBS Shipping and Receiving Department in 1984, and just 9 years later, in 1993, he was the Senior Vice President of Programming and Production for Cartoon Network. Talk about humble beginnings. Number 2. At the time, Cartoon Network had no original programming. It was essentially a rerun channel of old Hanna-Barbera, MGN, and Fleischer Studios cartoons. 8,500 hours worth of them. Basically, it was Boomerang. Number 3. Turner Broadcasting didn't give them any money for original programming, so the Cartoon Network team couldn't even afford to invent new characters. They could only repurpose the assets that they already had, and only the obscure ones at that. Ever hear of Lippy the Lion and Hardy Har Har? Of course not, no one has. Number 4. Lazo was a big fan of one of the obscure properties, the 1966 cartoon Space Ghost. He wanted a way to revive the old character, and after being inspired by the late-night talk show war between Jay Leno and David Letterman at the time, Lazo came up with the idea of Space Ghost as a talk show host, which would soon evolve into Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Number 5. The idea to use Coast to Coast in the title came from an existing project Lazo was working on, Wacky Races, and the idea he and the programmers had to cut up the cartoon to look like they were driving cross-country, or Coast to Coast. Number 6. A 2-minute pilot for Space Ghost Coast to Coast was cut together by programming coordinator Andy Merrill. He used rotoscope clips of the old TV series along with a pre-packaged interview of Denzel Washington. The scrappy ragtag pilot landed them the money for 5 episodes. Number 7. Every good talk show needs a band leader, right? For Space Ghost, it was one of his arch enemies, Zorak. Lazo and the team decided it would be way funnier to have a band leader who hated and wanted to kill the host, an anti-sidekick if you will. Number 8. Zorak was first suggested for the role of band leader by animator C. Martin Croker, who then did an impression of his voice. Lazo decided that the impression was good enough to actually be Zorak. Number 9. For the celebrity interviews, the team hired aspiring actors to actually wear the Space Ghost costume out of frame. Apparently, those actors were not always suited for the role, often lacking the superhero build. This caused them to be laughed at by the celebrity guests, resulting in unusable footage. The Bee Gees only had 19 usable seconds after all the howling. After 4 or 5 tries of that, the team started asking the guests to simply imagine a superhero. Yeah, good idea. Number 10. The animators wanted Coast to Coast to be indistinguishable from the 1960s show. Technology in the 90s would have permitted for more advanced computer animation, but the team chose to keep the lower budget retro look. Ha! Hipsters. Number 11. The animators of Coast to Coast were definitely running against the clock because they only had 2 weeks to complete each episode, 1 week to do the animation. Number 12. For a few years in the late 90s, Cartoon Network would follow up showings of Coast to Coast with the 60s and 80s Space Ghost shows, with a weird laugh track added in the background. Number 13. At one point in 1998, Space Ghost was slated to get an hour-long musical season finale to feature Corner Shop and Yo La Tengo. This never made it to air though. I wonder if Zorak had anything to do with it. Number 14. In 1999, Space Ghost Coast to Coast aired an episode called Table Read, which was a live-action rehearsal of the next episode, Fire Ant. It included all of the actors and writers, including Mike Lazo and Space Ghost actor George Lowe. Number 15. The manic, non-linear talk show format would later influence one of Adult Swim's modern-day hits, The Eric Andre Show. Number 16. In 1994, Ghost Planet Industries was founded. The company would later change its name to William Street Studios, the name we all know it by today, although Ghost Planet does sound more fun. Number 17. The success of Space Ghost Coast to Coast opened the door for several spin-offs, including C-Lab 2021, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and The Brack Show. All of them aired, unannounced, in the 4 a.m. time slot. Are you seeing the seeds of Adult Swim now? Number 18. Lazo tried to keep all Adult Swim production within the William Street studio. He wanted editors and writers and animators to constantly bump into each other and share their ideas. Lazo himself shared an office so that he wouldn't disappear behind some executive door. Smart man. Number 19. Adult Swim officially launched on September 2nd, 2001. Their first ever aired program was the Home Movies episode, Director's Cut. Number 20. Other names considered for the programming block included Parental Warning and Ibizo, which is Spanish for stop. Please don't stop. Number 21. To go along with the Adult Swim theme, the original bumps showed elderly people hanging around a public pool, while a lifeguard shouted through a megaphone off-screen. They were really trying to commit to that name. Number 22. Adult Swim's core programming philosophy was inspired by legendary TV producer Fred Silverman, who once said, "Look at what everyone else does and do the opposite." Number 23. The now iconic text bumps were actually meant to make viewers read. TV rarely ever requires reading, so the Adult Swim team decided to do the opposite and force viewers to do it. Number 24. Adult Swim actually has a bump team. The team works with Michael Lazo to create about 20 new bumps per week. Bump it up! Number 25. The text bumps sometimes serve as in memoriam segments for recent deaths. Some examples include Space Ghost creator Alex Toth, Neil Armstrong, Michael Jackson, Steve Jobs, and more recently, animator and voice actor C. Martin Croker, who passed away in September 2016. Croker voiced Zorak and Moltar in Space Ghost Coast to Coast, and Dr. Weird on Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Number 26. The visual bumps, on the other hand, are updated every few months based on what needs refreshing. The ideas for these come from animators, creative partners, and writers, and can take anywhere between a few hours to a few months to complete. Number 27. Early on in the night, Adult Swim has an Instagram-like format where they throw on cool imagery in hopes that it will retain their viewers. As the night goes on, however, they start to draw from other parts of the internet, like experimental music videos and GIFs. Oh, and nightmares. Oh, just kidding. Number 28. Some of the bumps may contain creepy, Illuminati-esque imagery, but don't worry, they just draw on these images because they're age-old artistic sources of inspiration that fascinate the team. Which is exactly what someone trying to subliminally message you would say. Number 29. There's a popular creepypasta based on one of the stranger bumps that aired at the end of the night called The Dawn is Your Enemy, as if that one wasn't scary enough on its own. Number 30. While most of Adult Swim's between-show video content is shot using actors, every now and then, a team member will make an appearance on the air. Number 31. One of the keys to Adult Swim's success is their emphasis on cheap-ass productions. Their shows often cost $50,000 per episode. That's enough to make about 1 minute on The Simpsons. Production time is also much quicker, with episodes usually taking 4 to 6 weeks to produce, rather than 4 to 6 months like some other cartoons. Number 32. Adult Swim helped launch the career of hip-hop artist Flying Lotus. He sent in dozens and dozens of tracks to the network until one day, creative director Jason DeMarco finally put one on the air. Since then, Flying Lotus has worked with Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar, and Tom York. Damn, thanks Adult Swim. Number 33. That's not all though. In 2007, DeMarco launched William Street Records, a record label based in the TV industry. The idea was that William Street Records would offer young artists exposure on television, which would mean about 2 million new people hearing their songs for the first time. Unfortunately, WSR eventually closed down because, long story short, Adult Swim is a TV network and not a record label. They not only had to put their focus on the TV side of the company, but they were limited in what they could do with the artists because of belonging to a larger corporation like Turner Broadcasting. During WSR's short-lived time, DeMarco did at least get some widespread attention for the duo Killer Mike and their EP, Rap Music. Number 34. Flying Lotus continued to pay homage to the network that helped launch his career. He created a secret animated musical alter ego named Captain Murphy, named after the character from Adult Swim's C-Lab 2021. Number 35. Speaking of which, C-Lab 2021, one of the original Space Ghost spin-offs, was created by Adam Reed and Matt Thompson, and based off the short-lived 70s animated series C-Lab 2020. Like Space Ghost, it reused pre-animated cells from the original series. Number 36. As you'll see, Reed and Thompson would soon become big figures in the Adult Swim mythos, but they first got their start at Cartoon Network as puppets, literal puppets. The two were hired to do the hand puppets for a program called High Noon Tunes, which was pretty much used to fill time on Cartoon Network in the early afternoon. They would come in drunk and improvise a deranged puppet theater until one day they set a prop on fire. They were asked to, stop the shenanigans. Number 37. After 5 years of C-Lab 2021, so is it C-Lab 2026 now? Reed and Thompson moved on to their next project, and because Adult Swim likes to keep it all in the family, that project was Frisky Dingo, an animated superhero series about a supervillain Killface and superhero Awesome X. Number 38. I know you may be shocked, but Frisky Dingo does not in fact star of Frisky Dingo. The show's working title was Whiskey Tango, which the creators had to change to avoid confusion with a brand of the same name. The new title became Whiskey Tango 6, which, again, had to be changed because it wasn't specific enough. They joked about calling it Frisky Dingo because nothing else could be called that, right? And the name stuck. Number 39. Killface was not originally meant to be the main character on the show, but Mike Lazo laughed every time he heard the name, so the creators kept increasing his role. Number 40. In 2008, Frisky Dingo actually received a spin-off called The Xticles about Awesome X's private army. It got canned after 2 episodes because its production company, 730 Productions, closed down. Number 41. Reed and Thompson's careers didn't end there though. Reed went on to create this show you may have heard of called Archer, and Thompson was its executive producer. Of course, that's on FX, not Adult Swim. Number 42. Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, was another of the Space Ghost spin-offs. Created by Michael Aulin and Eric Richter, it reused assets from the 1967 Birdman TV show, now having their superhero fight crime with the law. Number 43. From season 2 onward, Harvey Birdman was animated using Adobe Flash. Yeah, Adobe Flash. It made production faster and smoother, both desirable qualities of a low-budget show. It also proves that you don't need expensive software to create good content. Number 44. Harvey Birdman himself was voiced by Gary Cole. You may recognize his voice from a little movie called Office Space. I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow, so if you could be here around 9, that would be great. Okay? Number 45. Another popular voice from Harvey Birdman is none other than Stephen Colbert. Colbert voices Phil Ken Seven, the eye-patched co-founder of the 7 & 7 law firm. Number 46. Colbert has actually done voiceovers for other Adult Swim shows, including Venture Brothers, Rick and Morty, and American Dad. Number 47. While Space Ghost was a talk show parody and Harvey Birdman was a courtroom drama parody, The Brack Show was a sitcom. Created by Jim Fortier, Andy Merrill, and Pete Smith, it ran from 2000 until 2003 and returned with a single webisode in 2007. Number 48. Brack's father was not intended to be so small. It was actually a compositing error that made him comparatively smaller than everyone else. But the Adult Swim guys, of course, left it in because it was way funnier. Number 49. When the show first aired during its stealth premiere, it was called Leave It to Brack, maybe a bit too on the nose. Number 50. Dana Snyder got his role as Master Shake on Aqua Teen Hunger Force thanks to a few drinks that helped with his audition, if you call a voicemail an audition. He recorded and left messages on the voicemail of co-creator Dave Willis, and Dave loved it. Dave did the voice of Meatwad on the show, so they soon became voice co-stars. Number 51. Aqua Teen Hunger Force creators Dave Willis and Matt Maialaro created several other shows for Adult Swim besides the fast food flagship. Willis made Squidbillies and Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell, while Maialaro made Perfect Hair Forever and 12-Ounce Mouse. Number 52. Home Movies was created by Brendan Small and Lauren Bouchard and originally aired on UPN. It had been canceled after 5 episodes, but Adult Swim resurrected the series, and it continued for 4 seasons. Number 53. After Home Movies, Lauren Bouchard went on to create Lucy, the Daughter of the Devil, and later he created Bob's Burgers on Fox, which airs in syndication on Adult Swim. Number 54. Brendan Small had a prominent partnership with Adult Swim as well. He and Tommy Blancha are responsible for 2006's Metalocalypse, the heavy metal male-centric animated series about the band Death Clock. Number 55. Blancha and Small came up with the premise after home movies ended and the two of them were going to more and more metal concerts. One day, they had an epiphany, and Small contacted the Adult Swim executives. He let them know that he wanted to do a show about a metal band with lots of murder, and that's about all he had at the moment. Adult Swim was like, cool, can I work there? Number 56. Small wrote the theme song of Metalocalypse before writing any other part of the show. He took elements from Queen music and combined them with crazy black metal guitar riffs. Number 57. After 4 seasons, Adult Swim pulled the plug on Metalocalypse. Small tried to negotiate with Lazo for more episodes, a call which ended in Small furiously hanging up on it, but ultimately the show wrapped with an hour-long rock opera, the Doomstar Requiem. Number 58. If you haven't noticed by now, Adult Swim likes to keep a small network of frequent creators. After the Boondocks ended, series creator Aaron Magruder began a new show, Black Jesus, in 2014 with co-creator Mike Clattenburg. Unlike the Boondocks, Black Jesus is not animated. Number 59. Adult Swim is known for taking over remaining episodes of canceled shows. Some of their rescues include The Oblongs, Mission Hill, and Baby Blues. All shows that were aired on the WB were canned before their time and lived out the remainder of their lives in late night. Number 60. As Adult Swim's shows began to expand past the original run of cheap spin-offs, they had to start bending their rules about keeping the work in-house. Certain shows of theirs are produced from external locations, like Venture Brothers in New York and Tom Goes to Mayor in LA. Number 61. Many of the programs on Adult Swim are animated at Titmouse Inc. Some examples are Metalocalypse, Super Jail, Venture Brothers, and China, Illinois. Number 62. As Adult Swim toes the line into stranger territories, they still make sure to balance themselves out with standard comedies. The Venture Brothers and Stroker and Hoop are both edgy shows suitable for the network's sensibilities, but they don't follow the off-the-air or Tim and Eric quirkiness that would deter the average viewer. Number 63. Venture Brothers creator Jackson Public has said that producing an Adult Swim show from afar can be somewhat unrewarding. He said he feels like Lazo's stepchild since the infrequent communication doesn't always guarantee kudos for the work they do. Number 64. It's well known that Adult Swim is responsible for breathing a second life into Family Guy. After the series was canceled by Fox, it was picked up by the Late Night Network, where it quickly became their highest-rated program. Viewership boomed by 239%. Not even a year after, Fox decided to bring the show back, and it's still alive and kicking ever since. Number 65. Adult Swim aired an episode of Family Guy that Fox refused to. The episode, When You Wish Upon a Weinstein, was prohibited from airing on the original channel. Adult Swim had no problem premiering it as an exclusive. Number 66. Family Guy honored Adult Swim with a bump of their own. In the episode Big Man on Hippocampus, they inserted a text bumper advising viewers to watch Family Guy on Adult Swim instead of Fox. This episode aired on Fox. Awkward. Number 67. Beginning in 2004, Adult Swim has done yearly April Fool's pranks with varying degrees of absurdity. The first prank ever in 2004 aired all of the scheduled programming as usual, but all the characters had mustaches drawn on. Number 68. A major cornerstone of Adult Swim history took place in 2004 with the show Tom Goes to the Mayor, a kind of animated series created by Tim and Eric. In 2002, the two sent a DVD of the show to Conan O'Brien, Robert Smigel, and Bob Odenkirk. Odenkirk watched the DVD and responded with interest. Number 69. Thanks to Odenkirk's involvement in the show, Tom Goes to the Mayor featured a bunch of high-profile guest appearances. Some of them included David Cross, Sarah Silverman, Tenacious D, and Sir Mix-a-Lot. Number 70. Despite launching Tim and Eric's career, Tom Goes to the Mayor was polarizing among viewers. An outspoken group of people hated the show, largely due to its animation style and what looked more like a PowerPoint than a cartoon. Not even Bob Odenkirk liked the animation, and Lazo also admitted it was too quirky to really pull in the ratings. But, oddly enough, the network is actually encouraging Tim and Eric to get weirder and more experimental with their content. Number 71. Due to the success of Tom Goes to the Mayor, Tim and Eric have enjoyed a fruitful relationship with Adult Swim. They've created Tim and Eric Awesome Show, Great Job, Tim and Eric Bedtime Stories, and Check It Out with Dr. Steve Brule, which for some reason features John C. Reilly as Dr. Steve Brule.
Brule! Gotcha, scared you.
Number 72. Tim and Eric's production company, Absolutely Productions, went on to produce an array of comedy programs, including Comedy Bang Bang, Review with Bob and David, and the one and only The Eric Andre Show. Number 73. Absolutely gets its name from a home video of Tim's. During a family vacation in 1991, Tim asked his father to sum up the trip in 2 words. His dad's words? Absolutely. Number 74. In 2005, TBS split up Cartoon Network and Adult Swim. They still share the same channel, but the split allowed their Nielsen ratings to be tracked separately, much like Nickelodeon and Nick at Night. This impacted a lot of logistical television aspects, but in short, it's good for the network. Number 75. For their 2005 April Fool's prank, Adult Swim aired an unfinished pilot for Squidbillies. This pilot was scrapped and reworked prior to the show's official release later that year. Number 76. For their 2006 April Fool's prank, Adult Swim added farting sound effects to Full Metal Alchemist and Ghost in the Shell. Real mature guys. Okay, it was kind of funny. Number 77. 2007 was a big year for Adult Swim. It saw the releases of some of their flagship programs, including The Boondocks, Metalocalypse, Moral Oral, and Robot Chicken. Number 78. The name Robot Chicken seems like it would have an epic story behind it, but it actually doesn't. It was simply inspired by a menu item at a Chinese restaurant that creators Matt Seinrich and Seth Green went to. At the time, they were having trouble securing the rights to their other titles, Sweet J and Sweet J, which refers to the line, Sweet Jesus, that their elderly characters would often say in the live-action shorts they used to make together. So, after having dinner and seeing Robot Chicken on the menu, they decided to just go with it. Number 79. Like Family Guy, Futurama also reaped the benefits of an Adult Swim second life. Co-creator David X. Cohen used the show's late-night popularity to leverage a deal for 4 straight-to-DVD movies. When these proved to be successful, Comedy Central picked up the show for a new season. Number 80. On April 1st, 2007, Adult Swim aired the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie film for theaters. However, since it was April 1st, and since it's Adult Swim, they aired it without any audio in a small picture-in-picture window in the corner of the screen, while the other programs played as usual. Number 81. For their 2008 prank, Adult Swim promised to air the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie, and instead aired 8 straight stealth premieres. This included the second episode of Fat Guy Stuck in Internet, the unfinished Season 3 premiere of Venture Brothers, the unaired pilot of Delocated, an unfinished season premiere of Super Jail, the premiere of the miniseries Young Person's Guide to History, and early showings of Metalocalypse's Death Wedding, Robot Chicken's Tubba Bubba in Now Hubba Bubba, and Moral Oral's Grounded. Number 82. In 2010, Adult Swim began airing Rob Corddry's Children's Hospital, a parody of modern-day medical dramas. The show first began as a 10-episode web series back in 2008. Number 83. Comedy Central had also made an offer on Children's Hospital. Corddry went with Adult Swim because their 15-minute time slots were a better fit for the series than the conventional half-hour time slots of other networks. Number 84. The show was a hit and received 2 spin-offs on Adult Swim. The first was called NTSF SDSUV, short for National Terrorism Strike Force San Diego Sports Utility Vehicle, which was a parody of police procedural shows. It was created by Paul Scheer. Number 85. NTSF SDSUV had an unintentional backdoor pilot in Children's Hospital. They were short a minute for 1 episode, so Paul Scheer offered up a fake commercial for NTSF that filled the time slot. Next thing you know, a series is born. Number 86. The second spin-off was called Newsreaders, a parody of magazine-style news shows. It aired 24 episodes from 2013 to 2015. Number 87. Even though Children's Hospital had ended, Mike Lazo opened up the door for future one-off specials, which Rob Corddry has said he'll take him up on. No need to worry, the Children's are still our future. Number 88. In 2009, 2010, and 2011 for their April Fool's prank, Adult Swim played Tommy Wiseau's The Room. During the airing in 2010, they featured bumps of Tommy Wiseau being interviewed on Space Ghost Coast to Coast. In 2011, they followed up the movie with a showing of Earth Ghost. Number 89. Okay, so what's Earth Ghost? Well, in 2007, Adult Swim released a pilot for Low Country, a reality show starring George Lowe, the voice of Space Ghost. It never aired on TV and never got picked up. Earth Ghost was a reworking of that pilot with George Lowe replaced by a poorly CGI'd Space Ghost. Number 90. The spiritual successor to Space Ghost Coast to Coast was the Eric Andre Show, which first aired on May 20th, 2012. Like Coast to Coast, the show aims to look low budget and employs cringe-worthy tactics on its unsuspecting guests. Number 91. While preparing for the show, Eric Andre attempted to talk to Mike Lazo about Coast to Coast, but Lazo pretty much said, Space Ghost is dead to me. He is a ghost, so. Number 92. Andre's aim was to deconstruct the modern talk show, which included having fake musical acts, bombing his opening monologue every time, and being criticized by his very own anti-sidekick, the incomparable Hannibal Perez. Number 93. Andre first tapped Hannibal as sidekick while the two of them were doing stand-up together in New York. He wanted someone who could balance out his craziness with a sense of humor on the opposite end of the spectrum, and they were both broke, so the dream team was born. Number 94. Andre had no money for editors, so he edited the pilot of the show himself. He didn't know how to use editing programs, so it took him a year to do it. Wow, the ultimate DIY. Number 95. ABC wasn't happy about the Eric Andre Show, since Andre was appearing on their short-lived sitcom Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 at the time. When their show's name started popping up in the Eric Andre Show's press releases, the network demanded it be removed so they'd have no connection. Number 96. Despite the extreme and often illegal happenings in the Eric Andre show, Adult Swim has only blocked one joke, a country singer singing a pro-Al-Qaeda song. Number 97. For their 2012 April Fool's prank, Adult Swim aired the opening sequence of The Room, only to have it suddenly interrupted by TOM, the host of Cartoon Network's cancelled anime block, Toonami. That led into a full programming block of Toonami, including Dragon Ball Z, Gundam Wing, Yu Yu Hakusho, and Astro Boy. Number 98. After April Fool's Day, Adult Swim kicked off the hashtag #BringBackToonami campaign on Twitter. Only a month later, they announced that Toonami would be returning as a weekly programming block. Since then, they've upgraded Tom to version 5, reintroduced Sarah, and obtained a bunch of new shows. Just like the good old days. Number 99. The 2013 April Fool's prank had a tough act to follow, so they broke out the secret weapon, cats. The bumps were filled with cat imagery, and the live-action shows covered the faces of the actors with cats. The usual Adult Swim logo was replaced with meow meow. Number 100. One of the textbook examples of Adult Swim programming is their 4 a.m. infomercial slot. These shorts are vague, irreverent, nonsensical, and all are made by different creators to parody the typical early morning infomercial slot. Some creators include Rob Hubel, Aziz Ansari, David Cross and H. John Benjamin, and Paul Scheer. Number 101. Of course, we have to talk about Too Many Cooks. The viral hit first aired in Adult Swim's 4 a.m. infomercial time slot, but it really took off on YouTube, gaining 11 million views and inspiring parodies left and right, including one by CNN. Number 102. For their 2014 April Fool's prank, Adult Swim aired a marathon of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, with bumps showing outtakes and commentary from the staff. They also premiered a new episode of Perfect Hair Forever, which ended 7 years earlier. Number 103. For their 2015 prank, Adult Swim played a marathon of Aqua Teen Hunger Force, but in the bumps, they featured an Aqua Teen Hunger Force edition of the Coin Hunt game from Fish Center Live, one of their online shows. Number 104. For their 2016 prank, Adult Swim released a bump hyping up all of their pranks from previous years, only to do nothing this year. The prank was that there was no prank. Mwop mwop. Number 105. Adult Swim dominates the 18 to 34 market for cable networks and retains an audience of 43% women. Likely due to the network's viewer engagement, 94% of Adult Swim's viewership is live. This is shocking considering that's the opposite of the trend in the 18 to 34 crowd. Number 106. Mike Lazo received lots of slack in October 2016 for not hiring enough women show creators and making the comment, when you put women in the writer's room, you get conflict, not comedy. He defended himself on Reddit saying, women don't tend to like conflict. Comedy often comes from conflict, so that's probably why we, or others, have so few female projects. Reports show that Adult Swim has the least amount of female writers out of any network, with their ratio being 1 in 34 versus the usual 1 in 5 of other networks. Yeah, get on that, guys. Number 107. In 2016, it was announced that Adult Swim would be resurrecting yet another classic cartoon favorite, this time from their own station, Samurai Jack. The show had originally aired in 2001 on Cartoon Network and was acclaimed for its artistic style and tone, but it never had a proper conclusion. Adult Swim brought back creator Gendy Tartakovsky to finish the show in their Toonami block. See? No cartoon is ever gone for good. Ever.
Studio Ghibli is one of the most beloved animation studios, with dozens of immaculate movies under their belt. With Miyazaki's latest and supposedly final film hitting theaters this holiday season, why not take a look back at what they've done over the years? Here's 107 Studio Ghibli facts you should know.
Fact number 1. Studio Ghibli Inc. is an award-winning animated film studio based in Kogane, Tokyo in Japan, which was founded in 1985. Number 2. The studio was founded by animators Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, and producer Toshio Suzuki. Remember those names because they're all important. Many of the themes and practices employed in Studio Ghibli's movies come from the personal experiences of these three, particularly Miyazaki. Number 3. They've produced 20 films since their founding, beginning with Laputa, Castle in the Sky in 1986, and most recently When Marnie Was There in 2014. There was Nausicaa too, but that was before they were officially founded. Number 4. Ghibli comes from humble origins. The original Studio Ghibli office was located on the first floor of a house in the suburbs of Tokyo. Number 5. In the beginning, nobody expected Studio Ghibli to last very long, much less 30 years. They approached each film with a mindset of, if this succeeds, we'll make another one. If this flops, we out. Number 6. Studio Ghibli is primarily focused on creating movies for its Japanese audience. International releases are the gravy on top of the animation potatoes. Number 7. While Studio Ghibli is a very Japan-centric company, there are definitely foreigners in the office, especially Italians. Number 8. Studio Ghibli has a strict no alterations policy when it comes to the distribution of their movies. This is a result of what happened in their very first film together, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, which was torn apart for the American release and retitled Warriors of the Wind. In fact, Suzuki's official stance on the matter is, let's not talk about that version, okay? Number 9. Here's how serious Ghibli is about that zero alterations policy. During negotiations for Princess Mononoke, Suzuki sent American producer Harvey Weinstein a samurai sword with a note that read, "No cuts." But wait, isn't a samurai sword for cutting? Number 10. The former chief executive officer of Ghibli, Toru Hara, said that Ghibli ran using the 3 H's: high cost, high risk, and high return. In other words, anything good takes a lot of work and a lot of luck. Number 11. The name Ghibli is actually a word used by Italian pilots that refers to a hot wind blowing through the Sahara Desert. It's also the name of an aircraft, the Caproni CA-309 Ghibli. Miyazaki took his name for the studio because he wanted to blow a sensational wind into the Japanese world of animation, and that he did. Number 12. The original word Ghibli is pronounced with a hard G instead of a soft G used by the studio. Supposedly, this was Miyazaki's pronunciation error, and it just stuck. I mean, if you romanize the katakana in the studio's title cards, it would read out Jiburi or Jibri. Number 13. Miyazaki's father ran a company that manufactured fighter plane tail fins during World War II. Hayao became entranced by the process and the way all the parts connected, leading to his love of planes. Number 14. Miyazaki's mother, on the other hand, contracted spinal tuberculosis and was bedridden for 9 years between 1947 and 1955. Hayao drew on this experience when creating My Neighbor Totoro, which includes a mother with a long-term illness. Number 15. Since he was a boy, Miyazaki idolized mangaka Osamu Tezuka, who inspired him to become a mangaka himself. However, Miyazaki's view of Tezuka became sour after Miyazaki realized that Tezuka's manga were just versions of Tezuka himself. Miyazaki actually burned all of his own sketches when he realized they started to look like Tezuka's work. Number 16. Miyazaki is also a fan of the Fleischer brothers, who are best known for Betty Boop, Popeye the Sailor, and the OG Superman cartoon. He paid tribute to them in Porco Rosso, with the movie Porco is Watching. Number 17. The first animation Miyazaki saw was Hakuja Den, or The Great White Snake, in 1958. He was instantly captivated, and that was when he first got into animation. Number 18. When he first started drawing, Miyazaki didn't know how to draw people. He only drew planes and battleships, but he was aware that drawing people was essential to break into the field, so he started studying the human form. Number 19. Nowadays, Miyazaki is a professional people watcher. In public, he observes people's quirks and mannerisms, and later applies them to his work. As a result, Suzuki jokes that none of Miyazaki's work is original. It's all based on his observations. Number 20. Miyazaki became famous for animation, but he actually has a degree from Gakushun University in economics and political science, and his final thesis was on Japanese industry. He's a scholar and an animator. Number 21. He was also a member of the Children's Literature Research Club at school, which was apparently the closest thing his school had to the comics or manga club. Number 22. After graduating, Miyazaki began work at Toei Animations. After a few months of training, he was put into his first movie ever, Watchdog Bow Wow. Number 23. Let's shift gears for a second. Studio Ghibli co-founder Isao Takahata began his career looking to be a director, not an animator. He graduated from Tokyo University, which was the most prestigious school in Japan, and immediately started working at Toei Animations, which was still a new studio in 1959. Number 24. In 1965, Miyazaki and Takahata, both working at Toei, teamed up to work on The Prince of the Sun, which sort of makes it a proto-Ghibli film. Feeling like this would be their last feature film project before TV took over, they swore to put everything they had into the production. Number 25. Their hard work paid off, and The Prince of the Sun was a massive hit, is what you'd think would come next. But no, it was actually a flop, and Takahata was even demoted because of its failure. Fortunately, this did not break up the Miyazaki-Takahata partnership, and they went on to work on projects like Lupin III and Panda Go Panda together. Number 26. During their time at Toei Animation, Takahata and Miyazaki were already making history. One series, called Haiti, was animated by Miyazaki and directed by Takahata, and went on to be a landmark show in the East, drawing Japanese tourists to see the Swiss Alps. Number 27. Takahata and Miyazaki came to realize that the limitations of time and budget in television were too much to make everything worthwhile. They wanted to make something that had an impact and really emotionally delivered. This was what first inspired them to move away from TV and make their own movie, the first unofficial Studio Ghibli movie, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Number 28. Miyazaki and Takahata's first pitches to Tokuma Publishing in 1981 were for a Sengoku period piece called Warring States Demon Castle. It was an adaptation of Corbin's Rolf. Number 29. Both were shot down because distributors only wanted to make properties based on existing manga. So in 1982, Miyazaki launched a Nausicaa manga in Animation magazine. Very clever. Number 30. At the time, Miyazaki made an agreement with Animation magazine that he would not turn Nausicaa into a movie. Yeah, so about that. Number 31. When Tokuma Publishing finally approached Miyazaki about turning Nausicaa into a movie, Miyazaki had one condition. His good pal Takahata had to produce it, and produce it he did. Number 32. Now to introduce the third pillar of Ghibli, Toshio Suzuki. He was the editor-in-chief at Animation magazine, owned by Tokuma Publishing. Suzuki became part of the production team working working on Nausicaa. Number 33. While fundraising for Nausicaa, Suzuki was still fairly inexperienced. He assumed that they needed about 3 times more money than they actually did, which, hey, is better than 3 times too little. Number 34. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind ended up doing well at the box office and was critically praised as well. As a result of its success, Tokumo Shoten Publishing helped kickstart Studio Ghibli. Number 35. Even after completing the Nausicaa movie, Miyazaki still continued the Nausicaa manga all the way until 1994. Number 36. Studio Ghibli has a number of themes that have become production staples for them. The one closest to Miyazaki's heart? Flying scenes and planes. You now know about Miyazaki's background with flying machines, and he makes sure to remind you of it in nearly every movie he has his hands on. Number 37. According to Miyazaki, the idea that evil is a singular, destructible force is misguided, especially in life and politics. Therefore, a trademark quality of his movies is the shades of gray in which he paints his storylines and characters. Everyone's a bit good and a bit bad. Number 38. Studio Ghibli movies are also known for their leading female roles. Miyazaki's main explanation for this is that women have a deeper way of dealing with problems than just kill the bad guy, which serves Miyazaki's style of not really having bad guys. He also says that men tend to deal with things through words, whereas women deal with things through feelings. Number 39. When asked if there would be a female director at Ghibli, the producer of When Marnie Was There, Yoshiaki Nishimura, said that from a directing standpoint, women tend to be more realistic and men tend to be more idealistic. He later apologized for that comment, since it came off as saying women can't direct animation, which is a bit contrary to the morals shown in their movies. Number 40. Miyazaki films typically show things the way he wishes they were, rather than the way things actually are. He believes it's important to show positivity and hope, even when discussing serious and dark subject matters. Number 41. His manga, though, is totally different. Zaso Note deals with all the dark and sinful parts of humanity, like greed, violence, hatred, you know, all the dark stuff. Number 42. Before we make it seem like all of Miyazaki's motives are poetic and complex, let me tell you this one. Pigs. Miyazaki movies have pigs galore. Miyazaki often draws himself as a pig, and in Zaso Note, many of the characters are pigs too. Number 43. The Ghibli film Porco Rosso, which is Italian for Crimson Pig, is actually based on the Zaso Note manga. Number 44. Anyway, back to the history. After Nausicaa, Tokumo Publishing wanted another animated movie, preferably a Nausicaa sequel. Miyazaki and Takahata went to Yanagawa for inspiration and ended up creating an almost live-action documentary about the town, which was filled with historical canals. It was fittingly called, you guessed it, The Story of Yanagawa's Canals, and that's how a major league animation studio created a live-action documentary. Number 45. By 1986, Studio Ghibli had formed and released their first official film, Laputa, Castle in the Sky. It was another one written and directed by Miyazaki. Number 46. Miyazaki got the word Laputa from the Laputans of Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, who had their heads in the clouds. What Miyazaki didn't realize though, and I apologize for my Spanish, is that Laputa actually translates to whore in Spanish, which is why the word was dropped in Spanish-speaking countries. Number 47. In these days of the company, they aim to keep the budget low by hiring just 70 people to work on a film, and then dismissing them all at once when it finished. This is a standard practice in the industry, but not the usual system that Ghibli is known for. Number 48. Castle in the Sky did well, but not quite as well as Nausicaa. While Nausicaa drew in over 900,000 viewers, Castle in the Sky got over 700,000 seats filled. Number 49. The next Ghibli project on the slate was My Neighbor Totoro. However, Miyazaki was reluctant to pick the project up because 10 years earlier, the original pitch for the movie got rejected. Distributors weren't interested in 1950s Japan, they wanted another Nausicaa or Castle in the Sky. Number 50. Simultaneously, Suzuki made a deal with another distributor to do another movie based off the book Grave of the Fireflies. He knew while Miyazaki did Totoro, Takahata could do Fireflies, and they beat out 2 movies at the same time. Number 51. There's a notorious quote from Studio Ghibli history. Producer Tatsumi Yamashita was getting increasingly frustrated with Studio Ghibli's movie choices. When he heard that on top of Totoro, they were picking up Grave of the Fireflies too, he exclaimed, as if ghosts weren't enough, you want a grave as well? Number 52. According to Suzuki, from a producer standpoint, the idea of teaming up Totoro with Fireflies was like teaming up E.T. and Forbidden Games. Wouldn't that be a pretty cool double feature? Number 53. Producing My Neighbor Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies at the exact same time was utter chaos for the studio, because they refused to let the quality of either film be diminished. It was basically a suicide mission, but the company knew that this was their chance of making it big. Number 54. Their hard work paid off and the movies were a massive hit, is what you'd think would come next. But no. Ultimately, neither Totoro nor Grave of the Fireflies actually made it big in theaters, because their long production times caused them to miss the big summer blockbuster season. However, the films were critically acclaimed, which put Studio Ghibli on the map for further releases. Money isn't everything, you know. Number 55. Just kidding, money is great. Nearly 2 years after the release of Totoro, a toy manufacturer contacted Ghibli about turning Totoro into a stuffed animal. They agreed, and thanks to this move, they made bank on the doll sales, covering the loss in
in production costs. After that, they promptly set up a merchandising department so the next time they'd identify marketing potential 2 years sooner. Number 56. Not only did Totoro become a stuffed animal, he became the company mascot too. Talk about an overnight success. Number 57. After the Firefly's Totoro fiasco, Ghibli began to focus on just one film at a time. This way they avoid the madness of having multiple open productions, but it also causes them to sometimes go long periods of time without work after finishing a big movie. Number 58. Following Grave of the Fireflies, Takahata directed Only Yesterday, Pompoko, and My Neighbors the Yamadas, and also served as the music director of Kiki and the producer of I Can Hear the Sea. Busy man. Number 59. There's a clear contrast between Takahata's movies and Miyazaki's movies. Takahata's are more realistic and sometimes experimental, whereas Miyazaki's have become increasingly fantastical. Number 60. In 1989, Studio Ghibli made Kiki's Delivery Service, based off the novel by Eiko Kadono. Miyazaki adapted the script, making some changes to the source material to fit the Ghibli mold. Number 61. The original plan was for Miyazaki to just produce the movie and leave the development to the studio's younger staff members, but Miyazaki was unhappy with the script they penned, so he took it over, which intimidated the director, who then backed out, transforming the project into another Miyazaki film. Number 62. Unfortunately, Miss Kadono wasn't thrilled with the Ghiblification of her novel. The original book is a fun collection of Kiki's encounters, whereas Miyazaki turned it into a more dramatic, coming-of-age story. The project was almost scratched until Miyazaki and Suzuki invited her to the studio and convinced her to give her blessing. Number 63. Kiki's Delivery Service became Ghibli's first big box office hit, and was the #1 film in Japan in 1989, with 2.64 million tickets sold. Good thing Miss Kadono gave her blessing. Number 64. Prior to Kiki, Suzuki wasn't worried about fame so long as Studio Ghibli enjoyed their creations. However, when a distributor implied that Miyazaki would leave the company after Kiki, Suzuki immediately contacted NTV, a TV station, for funding so they could make another hit. Number 65. Miyazaki and Suzuki would often go traveling to celebrate the completion of a film. They've been to Ireland, England, and Italy, among other places. When they'd return to the studio for the next project, Miyazaki would have incorporated the landscapes they've seen in the film. Number 66. The first foreign country that Miyazaki visited was Sweden. It was back when he was trying to get the rights to make a Pippi Longstockings movie. Though he didn't secure the rights, he loved the landscapes he saw and later incorporated them into Kiki. Number 67. Suzuki says that the reason he and Miyazaki have remained friends for so long, 4 decades to be precise, is because they never dwell on the past. They only discuss the present or the future. In fact, they didn't even realize it was Ghibli's 20th anniversary when it came up. Number 68. Isao Takahata used to lead an animation school in Studio Ghibli, where junior staff members would learn about the arts of directing and animation. However, they found that great filmmakers do not necessarily make great teachers. Number 69. Ghibli animators used to make half the average salary in Japan. This is because industry standards are to pay per pieces drawn, which among a large team is not many. So Miyazaki came up with a solution: employ animators full-time with a fixed salary and regularly recruit and train new staff. That sounds a lot better. Number 70. The next big Ghibli production was Only Yesterday in 1991, directed by Takahata. It became a sleeper hit, unexpectedly rocketing to #1 in Japan in 1991, particularly due to its resonance with adult women. Number 71. Studio Ghibli was most pleased not by the box office success, but by the success of Miyazaki's plan to raise the team's salaries and still make a great movie. However, this also meant that production costs doubled from here on out. To compensate for this increase, Studio Ghibli decided to finally start incorporating advertising to secure box office success. Number 72. Only Yesterday was based off a manga called Omohide Poro Poro. The original book is told as a memoir about the narrator, Taiko, at age 11, so Takahata decided to incorporate the adult Taiko, writing the memoir into the movie. Number 73. Next came Porco Rosso in 1992, the movie about a World War I pilot cursed to look like a pig, which of course means we're back to a Miyazaki movie. Number 74. Miyazaki had wanted to set the story in Croatia, but he moved it after civil war broke out there. This made the movie more serious than he had intended, since obviously a story about a flying pig is never meant to be a serious movie. Number 75. While working on Porco Rosso, Miyazaki was under a lot of pressure, and to alleviate some of that stress, he drew a blueprint for a new studio, including picking all the construction materials. Porco Rosso and the studio both finished production at nearly the exact same time. Number 76. At the new studio, the ladies' bathroom is twice the size of the men's bathroom, despite approximately having equal male and female employees. People kind of attribute this to Miyazaki's feminism. Number 77. The studio was intentionally designed with less parking space and more greenery. You get the feeling Miyazaki cares about the environment or something? Number 78. In 1993, Ghibli differentiated itself from all the other studios in the biz by having animation, art, painting, and photography departments all in-house. The trend was to do the exact opposite, but the studio thought it was more important to keep everyone under the same roof with a shared goal. Number 79. Whisper of the Heart, released in 1995, was directed by Yoshifumi Kondo. It was the last Ghibli film before Princess Mononoke, meaning the last film before Studio Ghibli took off as an international brand. Their hard work paid off, and Princess Mononoke was a massive hit, for real this time. Number 80. Miyazaki did write the script and do the storyboards for Whisper of the Heart, but Yoshifumi Kondo was selected to direct it so that Ghibli could branch out from their usual 2 directors. Kondo was the top animator at Ghibli, so he was the natural choice for the job. Number 81. Keisuke Miyazaki, Hayao's second son, created a woodcut print called Craftsman Making a Violin in Prison, which is featured in a book in Whisper of the Heart. Number 82. Miyazaki quit Ghibli in January of 1998 and built a whole new studio, Butaya, or Pig House, nearby. Just 1 year later though, he unquit and returned to Ghibli as the new head of the office, as if he wasn't already. Number 83. Miyazaki began worrying about his aging staff, many of whom had been at Ghibli for 2 decades. He came up with an idea to open a shop so the animators could staff the shop part-time. They went location hunting for a place, and after picking a site that was far too big for one shop, they decided to open up a whole museum instead. You always outdo yourself, Miyazaki. Number 84. When asking for advice on how to run a museum, it was recommended that the place be quiet, dark, and not disruptive. So, in typical Ghibli fashion, Ghibli decided to do the exact opposite and open a museum that specifically caters to children. Number 85. Miyazaki designed the entire museum himself, using storyboards, as though it were a movie. He was inspired by European architecture, employing spiral staircases, bridges, and balconies all over the building's perimeter. Number 86. The museum first entered the planning phase in 1998, began construction in 2000, and opened in 2001. That's about the same amount of time it takes Ghibli to crank out a movie. Number 87. The Saturn Theater in the basement of the museum shows several Ghibli short films that are unavailable elsewhere. These include Koro's Big Walk, Water Spider Mon Mon, May and the Kitten Bus, The Day I Harvested a Star, The Whale Hunt, Looking for a Home, A Sumo Wrestler's Tale, Mr. Doe and the Egg Princess, Treasure Hunting, and coming soon, Boro the Caterpillar. Number 88. Miyazaki designed the theater keeping in mind that small children would be among the visitors. Worried that they might get scared in a dark basement, he had windows installed with shades that open up after each showing. Number 89. Since we did cover 107 facts about Spirited Away, we're going to talk about Studio Ghibli's next major production, Howl's Moving Castle, which quite possibly could have a 107 facts all to itself. Falling in line with Miyazaki's other recent movies, Howl's was part film, part political commentary, which may have helped him earn its place as one of Ghibli's finest. Number 90. The castle for Howl's Moving Castle, you know, the moving one, was actually not designed for the film. Miyazaki had originally drawn it to fill in empty space in the Ghibli Museum, but when it came time to design the moving castle, Suzuki recommended that they just use that one. They tacked some legs on it and bam, moving castle. Number 91. Due to Miyazaki's habit of being a control freak, Studio Ghibli was never really able to train anybody to take his place. Miyazaki had once tapped Whisper of the Heart director Yoshifumi Kondo to take his place, but tragically Kondo passed away in 1998. The studio put off making another decision on the matter for as long as possible. Number 92. At one point, it was thought that Goro Miyazaki may be the successor. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree in the Miyazaki family, or in this case, the child of a frog is a frog. This is what animator Otsuka Yasuo exclaimed upon seeing a storyboard by Goro and realizing that he ought to get involved in Studio Ghibli as well. Runs in the family. Number 93. Miyazaki was very critical of his son's work, and was opposed to letting him direct anything. That is, until Suzuki showed him a poster that Goro drew 4 tales from Earthsea, which was such a powerful image that it left Miyazaki speechless, and that sounds like a tricky thing to do. Number 94. Tales from Earthsea came out in 2006 to mixed reviews and less than outstanding success. Miyazaki still praised his son's direction with the film, but it showed that Goro was perhaps still not prepared to succeed his father. Number 95. Goro did go on to create From Up on Poppy Hill, which earned several awards and nominations, including a win for the Japan Academy Prize of Animation and a nomination at the Annie Awards. So worry not, Goro's story is not over yet. Number 96. One of the newer directors is Hiromasa Yonebayashi, who had been a Ghibli in-betweener artist and later directed The Secret World of Arrietty. He also went on to write and direct When Marnie Was There, one of the most recent Ghibli ventures. Number 97. Miyazaki's most recent film, The Wind Rises, came out in 2014. As a biopic about a pilot, it seemed like a natural last movie for Miyazaki. Suzuki said that he was particularly excited for The Wind Rises because, if you've learned nothing else from this video, Miyazaki loves airplanes and hates war, so a movie about war hating and airplane loving is just his speed. Number 98. A 2013 documentary, The King Kingdom of Dreams and Madness is all about Studio Ghibli during the development of The Wind Rises and The Tale of Princess Kaguya, which happened simultaneously. Old habits die hard. Number 99. For those aching for more Miyazaki, don't worry, he's retired 6 times and come back each and every time. His recent retirement, for instance, was interrupted to work on Boro the Caterpillar, a CGI short film for the Ghibli Museum. Number 100. Studio Ghibli rarely ever uses CG since Miyazaki prefers hand-drawn animation. The first time they used it was in Pom Poko, for a pan of the library shelves. Drawing this pan by hand would have been doable, but offered no creative value, so they opted for CG just to simplify it. Number 101. Miyazaki tends to dislike the storytelling in modern Disney films. He prefers the early short films, such as Silly Symphonies. Suzuki, on the other hand, raved about Disney's Zootopia. Number 102. The geniuses at Studio Ghibli and Pixar Animation Studios have an animation bromance. John Lasseter and Hayao Miyazaki are friends, and have been known to praise and visit each other. Talent recognizing other talent. Ghibli even gave Lasseter the head of the cat bus from the Ghibli Museum as a gift. Number 103. There's some fan speculation that Studio Ghibli movies are actually connected. They mainly point to the shared themes and lore of some of the movies as bridges, sort of like the Pixar theory, but not nearly as conspiratory. You can see those theories in our cartoon conspiracy videos, which will leave in their hands to explain. Number 104. In addition to full-length features, Studio Ghibli has produced several short films, such as Iblar Jikan, The Night of Tana Yamagahara, and Ghibli's. Number 105. 4 of the top 10 highest-grossing movies in Japan are Studio Ghibli films: Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, Ponyo, and Howl's Moving Castle. Number 106. Studio Ghibli not only brings home the green, but also the gold. They've won the Japanese Academy Prize for Best Picture for Princess Mononoke in 1997 and Spirited Away in 2001, as well as the Animation of the Year award for Ponyo on the Cliff by the Sea in 2009, Arrietty in 2011, From Up on Poppy Hill in 2012, and The Wind Rises in 2014. Number 107. In 2002, Spirited Away became the first foreign movie to win Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards.
And you probably saw this one coming from the very start, but how could we not talk about our favorite studio? That's right, it's time for 107 Channel Frederator facts you should know.
Number 1. Channel Frederator was launched in November of 2005 by Frederator Studios. Frederator and its founder, Fred Seibert, are the producers of some of your favorite cartoons like Fairly Odd Parents, My Life as a Teenage Robot, Adventure Time, Bravest Warriors, Bee and Puppycat, and more. Channel Frederator is the world's biggest network of animators. Number 2. The original inspiration for Channel Frederator came when Fred saw comedian Julie Klausner's Cat News on Channel102.net. Channel102.net was influenced by writer Dan Harmon's Channel 101. Dan Harmon is the creative mind behind Community and Rick and Morty. Number 3. Fred approached one of Frederator's former interns who was interested in internet video and asked him to build a website to feature animated videos. The visionary former intern thought Fred's adaptation of Channel 101 was very 2000 and delivered Channel Frederator as a video podcast formatted for the Sony PSP. Number 4. The former intern was then 19-year-old David Karp. 1 year later, David would go on to found the social media platform Tumblr. Number 5. Channel Frederator was the second video podcast to be featured in the iTunes Store when Apple announced its video iPod. The first was Channel Frederator's sister show, VOD Cars, created by Fastlane Daily and Drive impresario Emil Rensing. Number 6. One of Fred Seibert's reasons for creating Channel Frederator is that he wanted to find a way to meet more great filmmakers from around the world. Number 7. YouTube officially launched the same month as Channel Frederator Video Podcast. The idea of filmmakers being able to easily share their videos with the world was still a novelty. Uploading big files and even watching them online was difficult. Number 8. From the very beginning, Channel Frederator was at or near the top of the iTunes podcasts, and for a long time, consistently the #1 video podcast. Number 9. Channel Frederator Chief Programmer Eric Homan is also the head of creative development at Frederator Studios. While picking awesome cartoons for the channel, he was simultaneously developing the hits Adventure Time, Fanboy and Chum Chum, Bravest Warriors, Bee and Puppycat, and hundreds of others. Number 10. Eric Homan and development assistant Melissa Wolf contacted a variety of filmmakers to submit shorts to the first handful of episodes of Channel Frederator.
Number 11. Channel Frederator's very first cartoon to air was Pendleton Ward's student film, Barista. Eric Homan met Ward when attending a senior thesis screening at Cal Arts. Number 12. Melissa Wolf helped program episodes and ran the Channel Frederator blogs. She became a cartoon co-creator herself with Ann Walker of Random Cartoons, Sparkles and Gloom. Melissa is now a development executive at Amazon Prime. Number 13. Melissa conducted interviews with almost every animator featured within the first 3 years of Channel Channel Frederator. They can even still be found if you look way back in the Channel Frederator blog archives. Number 14, Melissa also came up with the Cartoon Hangover brand name, which would go on to be a cornerstone of the Channel Frederator brand several years later. Number 15, Eric Beck of indie mogul Epic's DIY Haboom fame made a Fredbot head out of paper mache that has appeared in countless promos. I still look at that thing every day when I come into work. Number 16, the Frederator robot was designed by illustrator Arlen Schumer for the birth announcement of Frederator Studios in 1998. The image was colored by designer Patrick Rask, refined by animation artist Eugene Matos, and named the Fredbot by artist Frank Galinsky. Number 17, the Channel Frederator logo was adapted from the Fredbot by Annie Chu and David Karp. Number 18, after seeing the first episode of Channel Frederator, Carrie Miller signed up and joined the Channel Frederator production team 2 weeks after launch and has stayed with us for all 10 years. Number 19, Fred defines Channel Frederator as a little film festival in your hand every week. Over the years, we've literally featured thousands of independent filmmakers on our channel and Tumblrs. Channel Frederator has gone on to establish an entire network of animators, but more about that later. Number 20, within a week of launch, over 1,000 cartoon shorts had been submitted for play on the channel. That's intense.
Number 21. Channel Frederator was one of the earliest video podcasts hosted by Libsyn.com, still one of the best podcast hosts in the world. Number 22. Fred wanted Channel Frederator to have the kind of cool packaging he started at MTV and Nickelodeon in the 80s. Justin Johnson was a friend of College Humor co-founder Jake Lodwick and fit the bill perfectly. Channel Frederator has been well known for its awesome packaging and early promotional skits. Number 23. Oh right, did we mention that founder Fred Seibert was the first creative director at MTV? He commissioned the famous MTV logo as well as the iconic I Want My MTV slogans and Moonman promos. He's also been responsible for branding iconic networks like Nickelodeon, Nick at Night, and Comedy Central. So this ain't his first rodeo. Number 24. David titled the podcast Channel Frederator and edited the first few episodes himself. He gave the show its signature snarky sense of humor. David was watching a lot of Adult Swim at the time, so he appropriated their signature style of simple type with elevator music in the background. Number 25. When David Karp created the first episodes of Channel Frederator, he liked that Fred Seibert would mail out printed limited edition promotional postcards. He used them for the episodes and they ended up being a standard element of every episode. Number 26. All of the music from the first few years of Channel Frederator was by composer Michael Karp, Tumblr founder David Karp's dad. Number 27. After a few weeks, David passed off editing and management of the Channel Frederator episodes to Frederator's then business manager Michael Glenn and head of development Eric Homan. Number 28. Mike had never edited or written scripts before, but he got a brand new Mac laptop and took a 3-hour editing tutorial from David Karp. From then on, he was on his own. Mike went on to be post-production supervisor at Next New Networks and fill senior management roles at Epix HD. Number 29. Intern Lee Rubenstein did every job conceivable at Channel Frederator, including making his own awesome cartoons. He went on to co-found the more awesome Eat Sleep Draw Tumblr and Art Snacks, a monthly art supply subscription box. Number 30. We actually can't even count how many episodes have been uploaded to Channel Frederator, but we can tell you that there have been at least 950 videos uploaded to the Channel Frederator YouTube channel.
Number 31. The Frederator preschool production Wow Wow Wubsy was pre-introduced to the world in an episode of Channel Frederator in March 2006. Number 32. Channel Frederator spotted Gravity Falls creator Alex Hirsch as someone to watch out for in December 2006 with the posting of his short film Imaginary Friend in episode 59. Number 33. Episodes 3 and 8 feature films from filmmaker Dan Meth, who later went on to create the viral video Internet People, and 2 full original animated series for Channel Frederator, The Meth Minute 39 and Night Fight. Dan is now a writer and illustrator at BuzzFeed in New York City. Number 34. Episode 8 also features Body Automatic by filmmaker Devin Clark. Devin went on to create the series Ugly Americans for Comedy Central. Number 35. Ed Scudder, co-creator of the popular web series Dick Figures, featured his film The New Guy in episode 11. Ed went on to win the Joe Robot Award for Best Use of a Robot in the first Channel Frederator Awards.
Hey, I'm Nikki Price.
And I'm Nikki Fong.
And today we're here to tell you about an exclusive Pendleton Ward cartoon that he made in college and involves butt dancing. And the only place you can watch it is on the Channel Frederator app that you can download by clicking here.
So if you check out the app, not only you get exclusive access to this cartoon, but tons of Frederator exclusive content.
posted by me.
So check out the app and let's get back to the facts.
Number 36. Fred Seibert produced several short series with Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon called What a Cartoon, Oh Yeah Cartoons, and Random Cartoons. Channel Frederator was able to show rarely seen shorts from these series like Zoomates by Seth MacFarlane, the original Fairly Odd Parents, the original Dexter's Laboratory shorts, and more. Number 37. In episode 3, Channel Frederator featured The Naive Man from Lollyland by J.G. Quintel. You might find that name familiar since Quintel went on to create the animated series Regular Show. Number 38. Darren Nefsey's short Scissors is featured in episode 68. She has since created the series Star vs. the Forces of Evil, which you can watch on Disney. Number 39. Ryan Quincy, creator of the short What Would Wolves Do, featured in episode 130, is the creator of IFC's Out There. Number 40. In episode 84, Channel Frederator ran Elizabeth Ito's Hot Cross Bunnies. Elizabeth has gone on to storyboard a number of feature films and episodes of Adventure Time. Hot Cross Bunnies was also nominated for the Badass Bunny Award in the second annual Channel Frederator Awards.
Number 41. Vera Brosgol's short Snowbow was featured in episode 3. Her comic Anya's Ghost has garnered both Eisner and Harvey Awards. Number 42. Meredith Grand's short Polaroid is featured in episode 31. Meredith writes the popular webcomic Octopus Pie and was nominated for an Eisner Award for her work on the Marceline and the Scream Queens comic. Number 43. Before Lorelei Bove was doing visual development on just about every awesome Disney feature film, she was working on her short The Pet Shop, which was featured in Channel Frederator episode 51. Number 44. Laika Studios was just a fledgling studio when Channel Frederator aired their very first short, Dia de los Muertos, in episode 54. Number 45. Stop-motion animator Kirsten Lepore's films Sweet Dreams, Craig and Walter, and Story from North America have both been featured on Channel Frederator. Sure, she'll be doing a little episode of Adventure Time this winter, but we're pretty positive that the true feather in her cap will always be the Frederator Studios in tag that she produced in 2009. Number 46. On December 16th, 2009, Channel Frederator went widescreen. Why'd we do that? Because wide is better. Number 47. In 2007, Frederator put together the very first ever Channel Frederator Awards, a live awards show that took place in January 2007 to show appreciation for the contributors and fans of Channel Frederator. Number 48. There are 18 recipients of the first Freddie Awards, 13 voted on by fans, and 5 juried recipients. Number 49. Independent filmmakers from as far away as Australia flew into Los Angeles to attend the awards show. Number 50. Justin Johnson, our chief promo producer, served as host in a show that was really more of a party than a show. The show part was filmed while the party was going on and then edited afterwards to present on the channel.
Number 51. The Channel Frederator Awards poster and program were designed by Adams Morioka in Los Angeles, who also designed for Sundance, Nickelodeon, UCLA, CalArts, ESPN, and the Metropolitan Opera. The illustration was by artist Frank Rocco. Number 52. John Lasseter received the first Cartoonist of the Year award for, as Seibert put it, seamlessly integrating his influential business position with his focus on maintaining creative excellence and integrity in all media. Number 53. The Instigator Award was inspired by one of founder Fred Seibert's nicknames, which he appropriated from Marvel Meister Stan Lee. It was awarded to the iPod. Number 54. David Karp received the Vanguard Award because, according to Seibert, he showed us how the coming of Web 2.0 and portable video devices were going to quickly capsize the medium world we played in. Number 55. In 2008, Channel Frederator aimed for another live award show, this time in New York City. However, the studio ended up creating a virtual award show with the videos submitted acceptances. Number 56. The second Channel Frederator Awards included 11 viewer-voted categories and 4 juried awards. Number 57. Dan Meth received the second Vanguard Award for representing the earliest independent animators who were harnessing the internet to make a name for themselves and their content. Number 58. Marjan Satrapi was nominated as the second annual Cartoonist of the Year. Head programmer Eric Homan explained that because Persepolis has resonated with so many people in spite of, or because of, its perceived commercial drawbacks, makes a mighty argument for there being a marketplace in the US for animation geared towards adults. Number 59. Recipients of Channel Frederator Awards received their own Freddy statuette, which was designed by illustrator Frank Rocco and manufactured by Clockwork Apple Studios in Brooklyn, New York. Number 60. The design for the second annual Channel Frederator Awards poster and book was by legendary font designer Leslie Cabarga.
Number 61. The Meth Minute 39 launched as a program on Channel Frederator in September 2007 with the short Internet People. It went viral and was, until this year, the most viewed video on Channel Frederator. Number 62. The Internet People video was sponsored by the new social media platform Tumblr as a piece of, quote, branded entertainment. Number 63. The brass lines on Internet People were actually recorded at David Letterman Studios with members of the David Letterman Band, Bruce Kapler, and Al Chez. Number 64. Because Tumblr launched out of the Frederator offices, David Karp had asked Dan Meth for a quick silhouette sketch of a person. Tumblr used this icon for new users for a long time until it was changed later on. Number 65. Based on the success of the Meth Minute 39 series, John McCarris from ad agency Digitas approached Channel Frederator and Dan Meth to produce the spin-off series Night Fight to be sponsored by Starburst Candies. It was one of the first brand integrated advertisements based on YouTube, and Digitas won OMMA's Agency of the Year award for the series. Number 66. Dan's short Drinking and Drawing inspired several live drinking and drawing events where groups of animators would meet up to drink, mingle, and produce a short all in one night. Number 67. Drinking and drawing events were held in New York City, Portland, Boston, Miami, Ottawa, and Los Angeles. Number 68. Contributors to the Drinking and Drawing films number into the hundreds. Number 69. In 2007, Channel Frederator started the first all-cartoon social networking site, Channel Frederator Raw. It was the first place for animators and animation fans to network and interact with each other. Number 70. Channel Frederator's former intern, Lee Rubenstein, ran a cartoon news podcast for Frederator called Toon Fuse.
Number 71. Fred Bits was a brief series of super short cartoons that ran as a spin-off program of Channel Frederator in 2010. Number 72. Superfan Carl was an on-screen host of several Channel Frederator episodes. He wore the famous Frederator robot mask that still graces Channel Frederator promos today. Number 73. Channel Frederator ran a retro cartoon podcast of all vintage public domain cartoons called Refrederator. Number 74. For several years, Channel Frederator ran a preschool podcast based around the Frederator-produced Nick Jr. show, Wow Wow Wubsy, called The Wubcast. Number 75. Cartoon Hangover began as a spin-off series of cartoons that were edgier than most Channel Frederator cartoons. Number 76. In 2007, Cybert launched Next New Networks, an online video company. Next New Networks produced episodes of Channel Frederator until the company was sold to YouTube in 2013. At that point, Channel Frederator returned to the Frederator fold. Number 77. Channel Frederator boasts a number of original programs on its current YouTube channel, with Saturday morning cartoons staying truest to the original podcast format. Number 78. In April 2014, Channel Frederator began producing cartoon conspiracies with YouTuber and animator Emily the Brave. Number 79. Channel Frederator ran a news show called Toon Buzz with host Sapphire Sandalo. While that show is no longer in production, Sapphire is returning in a new show called 60 Degrees. Make sure you go and watch the pilot. Number 80. More recently, Channel Frederator and Cartoon Hangover have been producing Tuned Up, exploring your favorite cartoon and animation-centric concepts in 107 facts. The show has been a runaway success for the channels.
Number 81. Currently, Channel Frederator's highest viewed video is a Tuned Up episode about Gravity Falls, and it has 4.6 million views. Number 82. Cartoon Hangover's best performing video is currently the third episode of Bravest Warriors series, Butter Lettuce, at nearly 7 million views. Number 83. In 2013, as part of YouTube's original content initiative, Frederator revived Cartoon Hangover as a home for new original cartoons from Frederator Studios. Number 84. Cartoon Hangover launched the series Bee and Puppycat and Bravest Warriors, as well as such shorts as Manly, Rocket Dog, Dr. Lollipop, and more. Number 85. In 2015, Channel Frederator ventured once again into preschool territory when they launched a YouTube channel for young kids called FredVibe. Number 86. In 2013, Cybert wanted to take the idea of helping and working with filmmakers to the next level, so he added Matt Geelan to the team to launch the Channel Frederator Network. The idea was to help animators work independently on YouTube and beyond. Number 87. The Channel Frederator Network publicly launched on February 19, 2014, with the announcement that Simon's Cat was joining 130 other channels in the network already. Number 88. Channel Frederator Network's very first network member was animation vet Gabe Swar. Gabe is still a network member. Number 89. The Channel Frederator Network currently boasts over 2,200 independent animation and animation-related channels in the network. Altogether, they are generating 500 million views every month and have accumulated over 40 million subscribers. Number 90. If every one of our monthly unique viewers at the Channel Frederator Network could stack an Eisenhower dollar coin one on top of the other, that stack would go 126 miles, which is into low Earth orbit.
Number 91. One of Channel Frederator Network's newest channels, Video La Verge, is a Spanish language channel hailing from Mexico. The channel boasts over 5.2 million subscribers and over 716 million views. Number 92. The Channel Frederator Network distributes channels located in over 77 different countries and on 6 different continents. We don't have any channels from Luxembourg though. Come on Luxembourg, get your act together. Number 93. The Channel Frederator Network has spawned several other networks. We have the Leaderboard network for video games and gamers, and Cinematica for movie and TV buffs. And we have a few more networks coming soon. Number 94. Network member Johnny Phillips will be producing an original short with Cartoon Hangover's Go Cartoons. Look out for it later in 2016. Number 95. The Channel Frederator Network recently worked with Rhett and Link of Good Mythical Morning to utilize 5 members of the network to create animated music videos for their Song Biscuits program. Number 96. Not that collaborations are anything new to Channel Frederator. Dan Meth and Lee Rubenstein ran the channel's first collaboration in 2006, called The Secret Life of Robots. Number 97. Channel Frederator Network member Yo Mama is a collaboration channel by Alex Negrete and Zach James. The channel brings hilarious Yo Mama jokes every week and more. Seriously, you can watch a compilation of 100 animated Yo Mama jokes in a row. Number 98. On a monthly basis, the Channel Frederator Network sponsors a network-wide collaboration across all the channels in the network. To date, we've had over 100 different creators contribute to these network-wide collaborations. Number 99. One of the network's most popular channels, Domix, was started by a 24-year-old self-taught animator based in Toronto. Dominic now makes a living as an independent animator. Number 100. The Channel Frederator Network now has about 15 employees solely focused on working with network members and helping them succeed on YouTube.
Number 101. If you could use the amount of time that people are spending watching videos on the Channel Frederator Network, it would power a time machine to take us back over 4 million years before human, chimpanzee, and gorilla ancestors split into distinct populations. What a fact. Number 102. The Channel Frederator app launched on September 5th, 2015. This is the first time Channel Frederator has had a home on devices since the original podcast. 103. Film Cow is a member of the Channel Frederator network. His animated series of Charlie the Unicorn shorts are one of the earliest viral cartoon videos. 104. Animator Sam Green joined the Channel Frederator network in November 2013 and says, "The Channel Frederator network has literally changed my life. They've allowed me to move out of my parents' basement." Number 105. Channel Frederator has been around for 10 years and it's not going anywhere. There are plans for tons of new shows and even original content for Channel Frederator, so stay tuned. Number 106. You don't rack up nearly 1,000 videos in your library without a little help. Channel Frederator thanks to hundreds of people who have helped us to get here over the past 10 years. Number 107. We've said it before and we're gonna say it again because we mean it. Channel Frederator loves you. Thanks for spending 10 years with us, and here's to 10 more.
Frederator loves you.
Tell us how much you love us down in the comments. And that's all, folks. We've taken a whole bunch of deep dives into the animation studios that keep the magic alive on screens across the world. Which studio's your favorite? Does any particular show stand out to you? Did you learn anything new today? Make sure you let us know down in the comments and subscribe for more like this. And remember, Frederator loves you.